Call to order at 7 p.m. on October 3rd. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Trumpman,
Here.
Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella,
Here.
Commissioner Bilt,
Here.
Commissioner Ross,
Here.
Commissioner Tudor.
Here.
Stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to do something I'm afraid is becoming a reoccurring theme here, and that is spend a few minutes to speak about what happened in Las Vegas and what's happened around the world recently. It's mind-boggling. I tried to sit down and write something, and I just couldn't. I kept trying to find words that would somehow be suitable for the event, and there are none. Somebody decided to do something incredibly horrific, killed and injured enormous amounts of people, and you don't even hear what happened internationally because there were several incidents internationally as well. I'd like to stand, if you don't mind, today for a moment of silence. I know you just sat down, but I think it's appropriate in this case. Thank you. Be seated. America is filled with an amazingly diverse community. My heart and condolences go out to the families of those who lost loved ones, of those who were injured, and for those who actually survived and had to watch other people be injured and murdered. Nothing more. Thank you. We'll go ahead and start with presentations. We have two proclamations, and I've asked the Vice Mayor to go ahead and read them. The first proclamation is for October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and the second proclamation is for Red Ribbon Week. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Proclamation, Village of Biscayne Park, October 2017, National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. National Breast Cancer Awareness Month was founded in 1985 to promote mammography as a weapon in the fight against breast cancer. In 1991, Susan G. Komen Foundation first utilized the pink ribbon as a symbol for the cause in its New York City race for breast cancer survivors. The Village of Biscayne Park holds the health and safety of its citizens as its permanent concern during National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We stand with our mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends as we recognize all who have joined their loved ones in fighting their battle, as well as the advocates, researchers, and healthcare providers whose care and hard work gives hope to those living with breast cancer. The Mayor, Tracy Troutman, and the Village of Biscayne Park, joined by the entire Commission, do hereby join the nation in proclaiming October 2017 as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We encourage all citizens to join in activities that will increase awareness of what Americans can do to prevent and control breast cancer. Proclamation, Village of Biscayne Park, Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd through the 31st, 2017. Communities across America have been plagued by the numerous problems associated with illicit drug use and those that traffic in them. Whereas governments and community leaders know that citizen support is one of the most effective tools in the effort to reduce the use of illicit drugs in our communities. Whereas the red ribbon has been chosen as a symbol commemorating the work of Enrique Kiki Camarena, a drug enforcement administration agent who was murdered in the line of duty and represents the belief that one person can make a difference. Whereas the Village of Biscayne Park has declared October 23rd through the 31st has been designated National Red Ribbon Week, which encourages Americans to wear a red ribbon to show their support for a drug-free environment. Our Mayor, Tracy Troutman, and the entire commission do by proclaim October 23rd through 31st, 2017 as Red Ribbon Week in the Village of Biscayne Park, and urge all citizens to join in this special observance.
Village manager report, Hurricane Irma update.
And that really is my report this month. The big news is Hurricane Irma and our recovery from her. And essentially, as you look around the village, you see debris being moved now. We've completed one full sweep of the village at this point. Grubbs has brought in their cutting crew, and they're working this week. What they're doing is going through looking for tree limbs that are hanging, that might be dangerous, that are injured and look like they'll be coming down shortly, and taking care of all of those, cutting those up, as well as some very large trees, just the trunks that need to be reduced in size before they can be relocated and moved. So those are being handled by the cutting crews. There's currently 5 cutting crews in the village, and we anticipate them being done, weather permitting, because the rain is slowing them down some, but by Thursday or Friday. Following that, we'll start the second sweep of the village, and they'll be collecting all the debris from that and stacking it next to Village Hall. Actually, we filled up next to Village Hall, and my apologies to all the residents on 114th Street, because we're working on the median down there now and then building a second staging site. And so that will be continuing. The chipper should be coming in probably the end of next week, and they'll start reducing all of the rubble into mulch and hauling it to the dump from there. So it's progressing. It's never fast as we'd like, but it is progressing. So
I'd like to just make a comment on that, if I may. We've been on governor's conference calls for what now, 3 weeks? I don't know. I've lost count. Every day we have a governor's call and an update, and the biggest issue in these governor's conference call is debris removal, and the fact that many of the subcontractors are not honoring their rates of the contract, and they're going elsewhere. So most cities don't have any debris removal going on, and I think if you've driven around anywhere in Miami, you've probably seen that and wondered why we're so ahead of the game. I'm going to give full credit to our manager here for that, and for the contractor as well for honoring the contract. We are very fortunate. Nothing is perfect, and we'd like things done differently sometimes, and we've discussed some of the challenges with having large equipment in here and rapid removal of debris and some of the things that happen as a result of that. But overall, I must say, compared to most cities, all we heard, for a week and a half, was, what are you going to do to allow us to pay our contractors more? And the answer was, we're not. So they're struggling finding enough subcontractors to do the work. So I want to compliment you, even though this is not a pretty site, it's very effectively and it's moving along. So thank you very much.
well, thank you. One thing I would like to say, Mayor, too, and I appreciate the kind words, but that really goes out to all staff, to our police department, to our code department,
Absolutely.
Public Works. I mean, all of the village staff have jumped in and have made this possible. So, if I stand, it's because they're propping me up.
Thank you. I absolutely concur. Thank you.
Christian?
Yes.
When should or shouldn't our residents let you know, let's say if there are some branches still hanging down, that they haven't come by and cut?
Absolutely, if they can, we've gone through and we are looking for all the ones we can find.
Okay.
But anytime someone sees one, please let me know. That way, I'd rather hear about it twice than miss it.
Great.
So
Do you want them to do that via email? Would that be the best way, or?
that would be great, yes.
Okay,
That
by
would be
email?
great.
Okay. And you were talking about the second sweep. Do you want to clarify about sticking out debris or not sticking out debris and bulk trash pickup and things like that?
Sure, we can talk about that. For the second sweep, we're not, it'll only be Grubbs putting debris in the medians, so residents should start putting it on their swales again, and we'll continue to work with Grubbs to get that removed as quickly as possible. Also, make sure and separate anything in plastic bags, like leaves and plastic bags, from the debris. And household waste, like if you have a small piece of furniture or something that Waste Pro would normally pick up, please separate that from it. So that, the bags, the household debris, all of that can go in one pile, and then your hurricane debris in a second pile. Waste Pro has been a little confused about what they're supposed to be doing, and the mayor and I both had, a few conversations with them today, and I think they're much clearer now. They will be back in the village tomorrow, and hopefully cleaning up some more. So.
And if you have any issues with bulk trash that was in the reasonable size that you thought should be picked up, feel free to put an easy track on that. or contact us if you try the Easy Track and it's not working. All right? Thank you very much. Any other updates?
I think that really covers it for the most part. We are working with our monitoring service and preparing to do all we can to get our full reimbursement from FEMA. Typically, the reimbursement from FEMA goes at 75% from federal funding, 12.5% state, and 12.5% city. The president just approved it today that in this instance it'll be 90% federal, 5% state, 5% city.
That's a big
So that's a huge help for us. And so I think we're going to be fine financially anyway. But nonetheless, it's always good to know that that additional reimbursement is going to be there.
Did you want to talk about shutters as well?
And absolutely. One of the questions that we're getting now are some people still have their storm shutters up. Typically, there's, just a few days after a storm, you're supposed to, with the amount of debris we've had issues with people cutting logs, cutting trees, that sort of thing by their homes. And those shutters being up right now is helping protect windows. And we're also still in the middle of hurricane season. Right after Irma, we were, sitting there waiting on Maria to hit, and fortunately she turned away. So we are being a little bit relaxed on that right now. I know that we're starting to get complaints from some residents about, seeing storm shutters still up, and they will be coming down soon. But while we're clearing debris, we're still going to work with the residents on that. So,
Thank you.
Mayor
I have a couple
Trumpman?
of questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do we know what's going on outside at 7th Avenue? There are about 10 or 12 cars. It looks like maybe they're the subcontractors.
I don't know. I came from that direction. I didn't realize that was happening down there. So,
Parked on the median and stuff, yeah.
They may be waiting for some direction. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's not direction from us. It must be coming from Grubbs, but there are 10 or 12 cars congregated over there, and
okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
I think you'll be,
Yeah, and maybe the cutting crews have been coming in their own vehicles. So,
yeah,
okay.
thank you.
And then with regard to the FEMA, we had an email exchange earlier today. Do we know what that 30 days it means? That deadline 30 days out from the declaration, which would be October 10th. What is it we need to do by then?
And so I've not had clarification on that. I have asked, we have some folks from FEMA coming tonight, and so I've asked them, we can ask them when they get here.
Okay.
Mayor, they're already here.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm sorry, hey.
If you guys can come on up.
Would you like to come on up and not
Yes,
let the
please.
village manager introduce you?
Hi, I'm Catherine Anderson, and this is Michael Bailey, and we're here with FEMA.
Your mic on?
Yes, hi, I'm Catherine Anderson, and this is Michael Bailey. We're here with FEMA. We wanted to just introduce ourselves and let you know that we're here, and any questions or concerns that you may have with your constituents, if you can come to us, we'll be more than happy to take it back to FEMA. We're sort of the liaison between FEMA and the elected officials. We've met with some of your representatives yesterday and explained to them a little bit more of our programs, but I did want to come by and bring some of our packets that we put together today that explain some of our FEMA programs that are eligible to individuals that were affected by the storm. If you're an individual that was affected by the storm, you might be eligible for temporary housing if you're not able to live in your house. There's also other programs that are available for repairs while your house is, if your house was damaged and anything that wasn't covered by the insurance. That's all in this packet, and we're going to be emailing you all of this information so that you can post it on your website or it's available to your constituents. I also brought an SBA packet that's available for SBAs, not only available for business owners, but sometimes it's available to individuals also who may not, things that may not be covered by your insurance. You may not be eligible for FEMA grant, but you might be eligible under the SBA program. So I brought that information, and I'll also be sending you a fact sheet on SBA that you can also post on your site.
Thank you.
What was the 30-day, was there a 30-day deadline from that Rox had just mentioned?
You had a question you want to ask?
There was.
So we were advised that the federal government has agreed to a 90% reimbursement for the debris cleanup in the first, and then the phrase "in the first 30 days" was somewhere in that announcement. I wanted to understand what it was that we needed to do within the first 30 days.
So that's relating to the PPDR program, personal property debris removal. So what we can do is we can get with some subject matter experts that can answer your question a little bit with a little bit more finesse than we can here. So we can be in contact with your mayor and give that information accordingly.
Thank you, because I know there was a lot of concern, not just with our municipality who was getting our debris picked up, but with a lot of the other municipalities who aren't able to get their debris picked up because of the not honoring the contracts.
Yes,
And then because of the federal procurement requirements.
Yes, PPDR, personal property debris removal, has definitely been a hot topic with this disaster.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, can you clarify PPB, personal property debris removal?
Yes.
Does that include removal by a municipality, or is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
only for private applicants?
So it's part of the PA Public Assistance Program. And again, I'm not, just to let you know, I'm not a subject matter expert on this, but part of the Public Assistance Program, there is personal property debris removal, which involves municipalities working with private homeowners. So we're seeing a lot of fallen trees and things of that nature. So it involves the removal of that debris from individuals' personal property, as well as maybe some land that will be owned by municipalities as well.
Okay, that sounds good. If that specialist can get in touch with our village manager, because
Yes.
he's going to be the executive, making sure that we cross our Ts and dot our Is.
Okay, I can make sure that happens, and we'll get working on it this evening. And also, if you all are noticing that your constituents are having specific questions regarding types of assistance offered by FEMA, another role that we can serve is that we can get a subject matter expert to an event if you all are hosting, and we can get a subject matter expert, whether it be for individual assistance, small business administration, things of that nature.
Public assistance,
Mhm.
mitigation, individuals from the flood insurance and FIP. You know, we can pool all those individuals together
As a
that
team.
can come in and, you know, be here to answer questions, and, you know, they can provide good information for you.
And most of what we have is the personal property. The
Right.
debris removal seems to be our hot
Yes.
topic here.
But we do also have some village property that was sustained damage
Yes.
as secondarily to the trees that were toppled. For example, there are sidewalks and roads. And I know there's some kind of program for flood mitigation and infrastructure support. And if you can get that specialist in touch with us, with our village manager, that would be great.
Yes, so if you submit your request in writing to us, we can definitely get that information to you as quickly as possible. We can also get a subject matter expert that could call the village manager directly to kind of describe the intricacies of that program, and then we can also provide fact sheets via email that you can distribute out at your meetings.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any
Yeah.
other questions?
Any? Thank you again for having us.
Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it very much. Are there any addition, deletions, or withdrawals from the agenda? Madam
Yes,
Clerk?
there are. We're going to be adding to new business under 13.D, the village manager 6-month performance evaluation.
Okay.
We just heard from FEMA, so that was our second edition. I don't know if anybody else wants to pull or defer another item that's on the agenda at the present time.
Before we do that, I'm sorry, but the chief, did you have I didn't know if you were going to stand and give some information.
Yeah, it's just in reference to 7th Avenue. It was Grubbs debriefing, kind of clearing out for the day, what time they're coming back tomorrow. So everything's fine.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any additions, deletions, or withdrawals from the agenda from any of the commission?
I've got a comment about one item, but I didn't propose it, so could I suggest?
Which item?
It is 8D.
That's under consent agenda, so we would have to
Wait to
pull it out from there.
So we go to do consent, you just pull it in.
Okay.
Okay? Okay? All right, public comments are open? I'm
Actually,
sorry?
I had a question about if we should pull the discussion on the board appointments until we have, because right now, the two applications is not enough to actually seat a board, so I don't know if we want to pull that and wait until we get some additional
You want to table it? Is there a motion to table it? Do you want to make a motion?
motion to table.
I would rather, since we've got two, let's give them the advantage of accepting theirs.
Okay, then I think because this is going to be discussed at this point rather than the motion, I think we should just wait till we get to it and then do it with it then. Okay? Okay, we're going to go ahead and open for public comments related to the agenda items, good and welfare.
Dan Samari, 1030 Northeast, 121st Street. First, I would like to thank Christian and his staff, Nick and Chief Nick and his offices, and our Public Works Department, and also any residents that helped the village get a lot of stuff done. I mean, I was very proud of the residents that have come out in their own spare time and helped out. And this is special thanks to Christian for what he's done, because I think he didn't sleep that much. He was here the first, 9 days, something like that. More than that.
Only 7.
About 7, excuse me. We goofed off the other 2 days.
Good.
Okay. I think this meeting should have been a discussion on the pros and cons from the hurricane. And it should have been allowed to where the residents could have given their thoughts on the right or wrong things that they think happened during this hurricane. I would like to know if the commission would consider moving, there's not a lot of people here, but moving some of the things that are on the agenda to our next meeting. I think that this meeting should have been a discussion, open discussion with the residents and the commission on pros and cons of what we did wrong, if there was anything that we did wrong. We had to learn a lot of stuff from this. I think that, like I said, the staff has done a lot of good things, but I think the residents have been not informed, or they didn't understand that we didn't have internet. So there was a lot of residents that were upset about that. I think that this could have been an open discussion instead of having stuff on the agenda that could have been discussed in our next meeting. Some of the things that I think we should have a discussion on, I think we need a cell tower in the village. I know a lot of residents are not happy about that, but I think we do need to have a cell tower in the village. We need to have FP&L do a much better job, because the outside companies did more better than FP&L did. To replace the wooden poles to with the other poles that they need to have. I think we really need to have them do a better job at it. Also, FP&L needs to, I think, give the village a plan on all the houses. There's poles, they know exactly whose house goes to that, so that when a hurricane happens or something happens, an example is my house, we have my pole that's knocked down, 10 residents get taken out. And I think FP&O knows who the 10 residents, because I've spoken to somebody at FP&O, and they said they know who the houses. So I think we need a better plan on that. That should have been given to the village ahead of time. And I think we need to have a discussion on trees. That we need to, I know a lot of residents were not happy about it. We don't need to cut our trees. Well, I think if we would have did a better job on trimming our trees, this storm happened to knock down the trees. It was more of a wind than anything else. And I also think we need to have a discussion on West Pole. I'm very unhappy with West Pole, and I think they have done a lousy job during this hurricane. Not to come in on their own. They should have came in on their own sometimes. When you have a business, you come in and you do extra stuff. That's not part of your job. Anyway, that's just my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any other public comments? All right, we'll close public comments. I'd like to respond to Dan on some of the things you said, if I may. Just to be clear, there was a lot of things in the hurricane that we learned a lot from. One of them is that there's no assessment teams from FPL on the ground. In all fairness, FPL, I think I can say candidly that myself and the village manager have spent a lot of time with FPL, both at the state and local levels, making sure that our 650 residents, after I don't know how many days, were not restored. We had 1,250 or so out. Basically, 80% of the village was out. And this wasn't by far a very, the storm was wide, but the wind damaged here was, compared to other areas, was much less. So there were many things that I learned, and I'll share them with everybody. One is that all the tree-lined cities had the same complaint. All tree cities had very similar problems and similar complaints. I learned that the smart meters aren't as smart as they ought to be, in that they don't ping out, you have to ping in. What that means is if you want to find out if a customer's out, you have to send a signal manually to it. It's not feeding an automatic response back telling you who's out. So the people who did the assessment to find out who's out is myself, the village manager, and several police officers at night. I almost got arrested one evening, so I'll share that story just to make everybody laugh a little. I went out at 4 o'clock in the morning to run around and find out who's out, so I could make lists to make sure FPL had who was out. And in doing so, within 5 seconds, I got pulled over with flashing lights, and Kevin almost arrested me. So, with that joke, I will tell you that there is no assessment. They don't have teams on the ground, and they don't have Comcast, AT&T, and FPL all working together to help one another out to figure out how to do it. So the challenge was not only one, which you did a phenomenal job on, and the whole staff did, was the security to make sure people were safe was left up to the police department and the public works department, the public's work staff, and the village manager, to make sure which wires were live, which wires were not, which streets had to be blocked off, what had to be barricaded, what wasn't, how many barricades we should have had when we didn't have, because originally and normally FPL would do that. FPL didn't. So that was some of the challenges. The other thing that I learned, which was very interesting, had to do with the fact that they don't have simultaneous restoration teams. So in other words, they were spread so thin that when they were complaining that they're not transmission lines, it's the one after the power station, and I forgot the name, not lateral lines. I forgot the name.
Feeder lines?
Feeder lines, that's it. I knew it was over with an F. The feeder lines were severely damaged, both sides of the feeder lines into the village. And the reason I know that, and I believe that they were telling me that was very truthful, was that after they fixed the feeder lines, they came in, flipped some switch, and a lot of people went on. 600 people went on. So the feeder lines were severely damaged. On top of that, so it goes transmission, substation, feeder lines, and then there's the lateral lines, which are the lines that you see around here. There was a tremendous amount of damage because of trees. Mostly what happened is branches and trees got wrapped around the drops to the houses or the lateral lines and snapped. Okay? And the issue of trimming trees, I think there's enough press on this that you will see that there are lawsuits involved in whether or not there was sufficient trimming of trees. There were a lot of tree trimmers here after the storm. Prior to the storm, one would argue that there weren't sufficient tree trimming. And it's not just the residents, that's an FPL issue. And I've discussed that with FPL candidly, as many mayors and other municipal officials have talked about it. The one thing I did notice when I walked around is the kinds of trees that went down. I was very interested to see what was the major cause of damage, and was there some sort of theme that happened with the trees. Ficuses were obviously a number one. I think everybody can pretty much be pretty consensus on that. They're meant to blow over. That was one. The second was Australian pines, and the third one was black olive. There was a lot of other trees, but those were the three main trees that I saw do the most damage to the village. I thought that was interesting from an ecological perspective to figure out what you want to have and what you don't want to plant in the future. A lot of the other smaller stuff didn't seem to create as much damage from some of the exotic trees. There was a couple that did create damage, but I didn't know the species because they were exotic. The cell tower issue and the communication, I just want to make a couple comments on that. I don't think any of us going in here really thought that we'd be that long without phones and internet. I think Puerto Rico and other places right now are having similar challenges. I can tell you, even Broward County and businesses are having problems with the internet even after they quote-unquote restored it. Those infrastructures have nothing to do with anybody sitting up here or anybody working in the village. Those are utilities that we pay and they're private contractors. FPL is the only energy company in the state of Florida. Comcast, AT&T are the two internet providers. The rest I'll let you come to your own conclusions. Regarding having a cell tower, if the cell tower had stayed up, maybe that would have been helpful. If the cell tower had gone down, maybe not. I don't disagree with what you're saying on the cell tower. I think you're probably right on that. I'm sharing this with you because as we went through this, one of the challenges was communication. And I'm going to defer that conversation to one of the things we have in here that does come up to talk about communication. That's actually later in the agenda item. So I'll defer that, and thank you. That's my only comments. Anybody else?
I guess my thought is, as much as we'd like to talk about what's happened during Irma, I think we really need to talk about it when everything is done, so we can see how things were finished, how long it took. Right now, we're right in the middle and everybody's upset. Let's wait till it's finished, because being upset's not going to do any good. Once it's all finished, then we can sit down and we can talk about it logically with a calm mind, and that would probably be the better way of doing it.
I will add that one of the challenges that I found incredibly difficult, I'm sure the staff did as well, was trying to make sure we took care of people that were elderly, indigent, or had issues. And since they didn't identify themselves before the storm, the only way we found out was because of the neighbors. I want to give a shout out and really piggyback on what Dan said. The one thing about our community that I really was impressed with was not only that they cut this, one of the complaints I hear is, why isn't Grubbs out here cutting the trees yet? I was laughing. It's because you beat them to it. Many of you went out there before we even got them in here and was already cutting down trees and moving stuff. That's what our community is people who pitch in. And that was just a wonderful thing. The other thing I heard in tremendous stories was people helping people out who were the elderly or had surgery or were indigent. Everybody was pitching in and helping everybody out. And the way we found out about who was in need was through all of you. So once again, the community is the best source of information for all of us because people oftentimes don't want to come out and say, I need help. So that was one of the other really positive things here. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah.
No, well, one quick thing in the pros and cons of how we handled Irma. I think tonight would have been a little premature simply because the staff, as staff, we haven't even sat down at a table yet and said, okay, what went right, what went wrong? And we actually have a meeting scheduled for that on Thursday. That will just be internal, and we'll start, I'll meet with the police department, public works, finance, everyone, and just sort of sit there and say, okay, what can we do better next time this happens? And put that into writing, into a plan so that, God willing, we'll not see another hurricane for the next 12 years, but in case we do, we'll have it there in writing. We'll have it as part of our recovery plan and preparation plan so that we can go ahead and do that. I think down the road, definitely I agree we should, do something, a village sort of meeting,
Workshop
or meeting where we can, take it and take everyone's opinions and get everyone's input and see what we can do better next time.
Absolutely.
But I think it's right now we're still cleaning up and we're just getting around to meeting internally at this point. So
I've done a little research. I've been trying to find out about a remote hosted telephone system.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, we could put messages on it where people, if they could get to a phone, they could call in and they could get some information about
Mm-hmm.
what was going on in the village. Right now we can. That system would also then allow us, or one of those would allow us to call people and say, hey, this is what's happening.
It
People
would,
just don't seem to want to give us our email addresses. Maybe they would be willing to give the phone numbers if it's only for these special things.
well, it becomes
Maybe.
public record. That's the issue. So.
and there's texting. There's a lot of things that we might be able to do communication, but that is a really great challenge. And without having a remote communication system, we've talked about satellite phones. There's a lot of things that we've talked about, and I'll defer that to that conversation. But there are a lot of things that we talked about enhancing and making communication better because that was one of the greatest challenges in the storm. Let's face it, the bullhorn I had in my car wasn't really the optimal form of communication. And we did have a bullhorn in the car.
We did. That
We
was
did.
one option.
Okay, we'll go ahead and
So
move on.
I
Yeah, Commissioner Ross.
did have a
sorry.
conversation with the manager about doing an assessment, doing a debriefing, but right now, everyone is still in a heightened mode of responding to the immediate needs, the cleanup and the safety in the village. So that conversation will be had, sounds like, and it should be had later down the road. The biggest challenge, aside from the trees, I think, was communication. And Unfortunately, a lot of that is not within our control, not within our immediate control, but we certainly can lobby and press all of those service providers to build a better network, to strengthen their network, and to make sure that they can respond faster. Although, given the storm that we had 5-7 years ago, the response time was much better this time. We just have grown used to having our creature comforts and not being without them.
And that's true. What was it, 30
So-
30 days for some?
Yeah. yeah,
And we
it
were
was.
done by 11, just to give you an idea.
It was. So one other thought I had is, once we impanel this Public Safety Board, maybe for them to look
Absolutely.
into, because it all involves public safety, so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Today.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. We'll go ahead and move information and updates. 7A, Village Manager.
Okay, this is RFP 2017-01. It is the recommendation for auditing services. We put out the RFP. We received 2 responses to it, one from Grau and Associates and one from Alberni, Caballero, and Fearman. And both were very well qualified and very similar as far as their abilities, their qualifications. Alberni on technical was a little stronger. And then we didn't really use pricing as a factor in the individual scoring, but when we came down to it, on top of that, Alberni was stronger in technical, and their pricing was better as well. And so the committee, which was composed of Beatrice Galliano, our finance director, and myself, we held the meeting and rated both of the applicants, and we come forth with the recommendation that the village hire Alberni, Caballero, and Fireman as our new auditors.
Do we want to make a motion to do that? Is that the?
Need a motion.
So do we need a motion to, is there a motion to go ahead and follow the recommendations of the village manager?
I make a motion to follow the
Motion be
recommendations.
to draft a resolution and negotiate a contract?
Right, the motion would be to approve it based on the numbers, and then we would be bringing it
Draft
back.
and adopt?
You can make the motion to approve it. We would negotiate the contract and bring the contract back to you.
My question is, do we want to do that and delay it further, or do we want to draft and adopt?
You could authorize us to negotiate the contract consistent with our terms, and we would need to bring it back if the commission was comfortable with that.
Okay. I'm comfortable just because of the time frame, as long as it's within the guidelines that are here. If there's something else, then would have to come back.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to?
I make a motion to go along with the village manager's recommendation and to draft a contract and then bring it back to us.
Adopt or?
Adopt.
Draft and adopt.
Draft and adopt the contract.
Draft and
in-
adopt,
Okay.
yes.
As
As per the specifications
In the RFP.
in the RFP.
is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to consent agenda. I think you wanted to pull something. 8D, you want to pull?
Yes, I did. My question was,
Just pull it for now.
Can we just approve the balance of the consent agenda?
Yeah, well, let's first pass the balance of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to
I make a
pass?
motion.
it was the whole 8D.
So only 8D is being pulled, and that was a motion to approve consent. Thank you.
Okay, so is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Do you want to discuss 8D now?
Yeah, I had asked a couple of our residents about this, and I guess maybe it's my thought, it's a little bit beyond us. We are actually sending a letter to the Treasury Department that we're approving the United States foreign policy. That seems like a little bit of a stretch. It's the kind of thing that we tend to get into, things that we have no input on, we have no control over. We've done this in the past. This is the kind of thing I think, even if it costs us a minimal amount of money, we need to stay away from.
Any other comments?
Yes. We don't very often get involved in international matters, and of course, we don't have a lot of weight in that, but we do have residents of Venezuelan descent and with relatives and families in Venezuela. This commission has in the past supported the demonstrators who are being prosecuted and jailed in an unconscionable fashion, and therefore I brought this letter, which is being signed by many mayors and many commissions throughout the county, throughout the state, I guess probably throughout the country. What it is a letter to the president supporting the sanctions that have already put in place. We're not asking them to change their policy. We're just showing support for our people in Venezuela. And I brought it to the commission to suggest that we have a united front in support, but I'm happy to sign the letter by myself as commissioner in the village, and whoever feels comfortable signing it can, and whoever doesn't can refrain.
Vice Mayor.
The one comment I wanted to make, I'm comfortable with the support language. The only thing that I questioned was anything that makes us look partisan. And I think it was just one bullet point here. I didn't really see it in the body of the document where there's an urge to grant temporary protection status. And that seems like we're asking for something, but again, I don't think I read it actually in the body of the language of the document itself. But sitting here, I mean, I don't have an issue showing support. I want to be careful, since we're bipartisan, I want to be careful that we're not doing something that's too partisan.
Commissioner Tudor?
Now, looking over this letter, I can understand the Vice Mayor's concern about the one bullet point, but overall, I have no difficulty or issues with signing this letter and presenting it.
I'm going to ask a question of the attorney, if I may. I just want clarification for the public, and I know we've had a discussion on it. Is it better to put a resolution together, or is it better to send a letter? How is that normally done in most cases?
It's really, the better is really up to what the commission wants to do. Often it's a resolution, but it can be a letter. I recently sent a letter to President Trump for on behalf of another city for a individual who's been held hostage, for example. So it's just up to the will of this commission. You could make it a resolution, you could keep this letter. I would just note, based on the comment of two commissioners, if you want to follow through, that there is a bullet point in the letter urging the administration to grant temporary protected status. So if you want that out, then you can discuss that. If you don't want it out, it's in there. So
I think we struggle with this all the time, where we spend commission time, attorney time. In this case, it's minimal. It really is. And this is another situation where horrible things are happening in a country where we have a lot of folks who live here from Venezuela. So I support that concept. will also agree with Vice Mayor that we have to be careful to be not be partisan. And for that reason, I would ask that bullet point be removed. Other than that, I would support the whole letter.
I support it. I support it as an individual. I do not support it as a committee.
Right, I would sign that individually, that's not my issue, but we represent everybody in the village. And not everybody in the village is going to concur with our individual support. And because we are bipartisan, we need to, I believe, be that as a commission. That's why, if we're going to do this as a commission, I would recommend pulling that bullet point.
If I could respond, granting temporary protective status, I don't believe is a partisan issue. But if that's what would take for the majority of the commission to support and sign the letter, then we can strike that one line out of it.
Do we have consensus on that? Alternatively, we individually sign it. That's the only alternative I can think at this point, unless we have, a three. What do you want to do? Or not do it at all? I mean, these are...
I'll just state, if we want to go through individually, I'm fine to sign it with that stricken. And also, I would just say before, if the whole commission signs it, that we just do another read of it, because I did find some typos. But I'm fine with signing it with that bullet point stricken.
And was there some typos you just want to put?
Want me to lay them out now?
Yeah, might as well just get it done.
Okay, Okay, first paragraph, I just want to make sure that the regime is referred to as the Maduro. It reads a little funny. If that's how it's referred, that's fine. In the second paragraph that starts as you know, I think it's like the third sentence in, that should be a the Maduro rather than he. And then I believe on page 2, the top line, right after North Korea, I don't know if that's one of, or it should be one of the only 4 heads of state.
That sounds correct.
Yep.
And the last paragraph, to that end, the last sentence, we would like to, I'm assuming, I don't know if that should be reinstate our support.
No, it should be just
Or
state.
reassert,
How about just assert our
however it was intended to be, but
Reiterate.
And just a clarification from Commissioner Ross. Who drafted this? Did you?
This was drafted, it's been drafted and used by other cities. I didn't
Do you know,
create
you
it.
don't know where, there was a Florida League of Cities, or?
I think maybe the Miami-Dade was Miami-Dade League of
League of
Cities.
Cities? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. With is there a motion to then go ahead and sign the letter as amended?
I make that motion to support the U.S. Treasury Department sanctions imposed on Venezuela and sign this letter.
As amended?
As amended.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
I.
Aye.
To continue. Is that A or
I'm
no?
opposed.
Okay. Board appointments. I'm going to let Commissioner Tutor, since that was your piece, do you want to open that? Talk about it?
My initial thought was whether or not we should hold off on the board appointments until we have a full complement, but, that was my initial thought.
I share that thought only because one of the things we had talked about when we initially did this was to have a selection from enough people. And I think because of the hurricane and everything going on, I just think we're kind of rushing it. And that's not to say anything about the 2 candidates who want to be on the board. I just think in order to have to look at something, you need a full complement of to use your words, board members. So I'd like to hold off till we have at least, if it's 5 on a board, let's at least have 7 or 8.
I guess my thought is we've waited so long, and I think we approved this board 3 months ago, right? Something like that? 2 or 3 months ago? And we've had nobody apply.
Maybe we've done, that's what I was going to ask. Maybe we as commissioners, that hasn't been our focus. Why don't we at least give it at least a month to try and find more candidates and see where you are? Because if not, you still have only a board of 2, which is not a board. So you don't have enough members. So either way, you don't have enough members. So rather than go into it not quite done and just throw people on a board, why don't we at least try to, at least either next month or December, decide either November or December, and come back with a full complement and go then? Because one of the things we promised to do was to make sure we had a board that was filled with individuals who could be constructive to that board.
So that's, by saying
I don't know
that,
who wants to speak first. I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your thoughts.
that means that you're thinking these are not constructive to the board.
No, I'm not saying that. It's not the antithesis of that. What I'm saying is you still only have 2 members, and you can't have a board with 2 members, so you still don't have enough for us to appoint. So I would like to, and I want them just to wait. It's a month. We're not talking years. Just let's try and get a whole bunch of folks put on. We may only get 4 or 5 anyway, but at least this way we have a full board. That's my thought. I'm sorry, Commissioner Ross, and then Vice Mayor.
I agree that it seems better for us to really make a push and get people to submit their applications. I know I have an invitation out there already that resulted from the storm and all of that. So I'm sure that it's going to be, public safety is going to be a topic of conversation. People will have more interest in doing it. And we're not limited to 5. It could be 2 alternates as well. So
Right.
if we get 7 applications, terrific.
All 7, right.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree with that, especially what's been mentioned today about wanting to get things together about hurricane awareness and preparedness and everything like that. It could be something that's an extra push for individuals to seek out this committee. And if there hasn't been the interest before, I think it is a little premature just to select the two, and we want it to be useful for everyone. So if we get the word out there and actually describe this within the confines of even what just happened, we can get a lot more interest, and I think it would be beneficial.
And for the record, I just want to say I'm supportive of those two applications. We just need more people involved.
Okay.
Since it's Johnson Advisory Board, do we have to have a minimum number?
Because we're appointing and voting on.
Right, we do have a quorum requirement for all our boards. So these people are interested, but it's probably best to appoint them all at one time if you can, because technically, if you appointed both of these people and you didn't have a board for 2 or 3 months, they're technically under a sunshine issue without even having a board.
Okay.
That way you can get them all notified at the same time and set your first meeting. It's kind of nice to strike while the iron's hot with that.
Okay. Is there a consensus to do that? And do you want to make it November or December, your choice, to just have bring it back? You want to wait till we have enough, and then you can decide?
Let's wait until we have enough. If it's
Okay.
next month, it's next month.
All right.
Okay.
Do you have a consensus, everybody?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So the next is resolution, so Attorney Hearn.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is Resolution 2017-48. A resolution of the Mayor and Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, ratifying an agreement between the Village of Biscayne Park and BC Peabody, Inc. for disaster debris monitoring services, providing for an effective date.
Do you want to, Village Manager, do you want to discuss how that came about?
Absolutely. With the use of grubs, we needed a monitoring company to really watch everything they do and document everything they do and report it back to FEMA in order for us to be reimbursed. The monitoring company, the cost of them are reimbursable by FEMA as well.
So the max out-of-pocket would be around $6,250 if I did my math correctly?
Presumably.
Presumably.
I mean, I don't want to throw out hard numbers on that, because right now, there's a lot of shifting sands.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be held to that. But, I mean, assuming that we approve it at $125,000 tonight, and we wind up paying 5% of that,
See if I did my math correct.
and that would be $6,496 that we would be, held responsible for, which is certainly affordable. But there's a lot of assumptions in that.
Yes.
So I do want to qualify it.
Yeah.
That said, for us to get anything back from FEMA, we have to have the monitoring company. They have to literally check every dump truck, measure it for cubic yards,
Pictures.
confirm that each dump truck is full or 3/4 full or half full. All of this are required by the federal government for reimbursement. So we're sort of between a rock and a hard spot. We really have to have them. And so with that, we initially set up the contract under emergency situation with a basic $10,000 to just get us started. The current estimate from BC Peabody on what it's going to cost for them to do monitoring throughout the whole recovery is $125,000 right now. So.
Okay. And to be clear, we were in a state of emergency when we had to make that decision, and I signed off on that contract. Initially, we didn't think it was going to be that much, but after noticing what our needs were, it became higher. So I just want to be clear to everybody, to be completely transparent. So that's why it's under ratification.
And we also did reach out to other monitoring companies and spoke with the general counsel, former general counsel of FEMA on it as well, and how best to proceed. So we do have our documentation.
We were actually less expensive than one of the contracts that I looked at significantly.
Yeah, there's been a lot of difficulties out there.
Yeah. Okay. So,
I was ready to make a motion until I heard the mayor say I signed off on that, and I just have to make that clarification, because it should be in my mind, reading the charter, it should be the village manager who made the decision, and now he's asking the entire commission to ratify that decision.
I want to be clear.
Great that you were supportive of him, but I don't
No,
think
that's
the
not what I'm
charter
saying.
really allows for that.
Well, village attorney, do you want to jump on that? Because I had to sign it, what my understanding, because you all sent it to me to sign.
Well,
so.
under the state of emergency, if the manager signed it, I'd have no issue with it as well. But since the state of emergency, you signed it. Actually, during this time, you had internet You did not have access to it. You were actually emailing me. I had to email documents back to BC Peabody.
That's why they
get
asked to sign it,
signed,
okay.
And that's how it happened.
I was
that
asked to
way.
sign it, so.
The reason was logistical, but the point is, it's the ratification needs to be done by this entire commission.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 2017-48 to use the services of BC Peabody for disaster debris monitoring services.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I want to thank the village attorney and the village manager during that time, who went out of their way to make sure we had everything we needed, so we were doing it correctly, so we would be reimbursed, because the out-of-cost expenses would have been tremendous. Okay. Old business, I think we're on the driveway ordinance. I'm going to go ahead and let the village attorney talk about it, since he's the one who drafted this.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll start with, there's a two-page memo that I sent, and I'll start probably towards the end of it, where we're still talking about making sure that this commission agrees on the concepts. Some of them I have in there that you may or may not agree on. That's why I want to talk to you about it, such as the abutting property owners, or the special exception, which was not specifically perhaps voted on. My understanding was that you did agree on that, but I want to reconfirm it. So I have a list of 12 things that I believe you agreed on at some level, or I at least put in there. We still need to do some work, I know, on, I started on the landscape rocks versus gravel, or P-rock or limestone, so we can talk about that. So the first time it came back in June, you reviewed the ordinance. It happened to be the mayor's suggested ordinance. I actually worked off the other ordinance. Then in July, you continued to work off the mayor's ordinance. So I actually worked off the mayor's ordinance for the second part. Again, while you'll see it in there as an example ordinance form, it's nothing like the ordinance is going to look like, because I have to take whatever's in there now, completely frock it. For example, you'll see that I just didn't address definitions. Some of them, for example, Commissioner Bilt has raised, because they're clearly irrelevant based on the age of the definitions, and we don't even address them. Others of them, for example, Mayor, in your ordinance, we talked about the maximum vehicles, and I think my best recollection of, and what we've done, I've listened to the meetings. My paralegal, I know Marlon has, and maybe others, and so we're bringing back what we think it best represents your concepts. I'm sure there's going to be some more work today, but the goal would be, when you're ready, we would actually come back with an ordinance. So, having said that, Mayor, so I can go through, and I'd be happy to, the memo very quickly. 1, 2, and if you want to talk about them, we can, or I can just read them so the public hears it. But number 1 was the new dwelling construction renovations that increase the square footage of a residential structure by 25% or more requires the development of an off-street driveway. That's been agreed by this commission on several meetings. 2, up to 40% of the swale area may be developed for parking. The 40% includes any driveway approach. This commission's been very clear about that. 3, other than the driveway approach on the swale, any of the development of the swale for parking must be pervious. Again, this is very clear from the commission's direction. 4, any material in the swale area used for parking must be compatible, harmonious with any driveway on the property. That was confirmed at the last meeting, if not the meeting before. 5, existing non-conforming parking surface on the swale may be allowed to remain as non-conforming structures used until 50% or more of the surface requires repair. This here, I had a conversation with Elizabeth, had a conversation with Christian and our building staff. It appears that we don't have the records that would show whether they're permitted or not. So I added here in the parentheses that we would just apply that whether or not expressly permitted. You could decide that you just only want to allow them if they've been permitted. I don't think we're going to have the records to show whether any of them have been permitted. Well, the vast majority of them we probably will not have the records to show. And from my conversation with the manager, we may not have great confidence that would mean that they weren't permitted at some time. That is the reason I've made that suggestion, but that's up to this commission. Provide abutting property owners rights obligations concerning the swale parking. We talked about that that a good amount. I believe it was Commissioner Tudor asked me to look at Miami Lakes, which I did, and I kind of adopted that. We've actually had conversations with Miami Lakes. They have even a citation process for that. They do warnings first. I have those forms. If we go forward, I will convert them to our forms, and I will get with the police chief on that as need be as well. But that was not a 100% consensus, so I would want to confirm that that's the direction this commission wants to go. Agreed to keep special exception provisions for those properties where due to unusual nature of the property makes off-street parking impractical. Is my understanding there was consensus there, but I'd like to have that confirmed if there was. Allows park and swale during national holidays, allows for a permitting process to park and swale during special events. That wasn't exactly, to me, 100% clear. I put it in there just so there would be language in there. That I would like you to address that tonight if we're going to move forward. Number 9, remove requirements providing a maximum number of vehicles allowed in residential areas. I believe that there was basic consensus to do that.
Does it make sense to go ahead and sort of ratify them one by one as you
That would be
go
great.
through them?
Does that make sense with the commission?
Do you want to go for the last 3 first, and then we'll just go back over them?
Yeah, number 10 is easy, provided corner side yard clarification. 11, distinguish landscape rocks from allowable gravel surface. I need to work on that, I believe.
Yeah, that one is.
And 12, deleted minimum setback for renovations, increasing square footage of off-street parking service by 25% or more. That was done right here. We even crossed it out, so I have great confidence in that. But, Mayor, I think if everyone agrees, I believe 1 through 5 has been very solidly consensus of this commission. I had it in my last memo as, I believe, the 5 that you had agreed upon. I didn't get any. I think we went through that.
I think the only question I had on 5 was a technical one, and the only scenario I kept coming up.
Expressly permitted, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that 1 through 4 I had no problem, but the one that was sticking out of my mind is if somebody just throws a bunch of rock down, and it's been there, but it's not really a driveway, it's kind of like a mess. Do we call that the 50% deterioration in order to get around that? Because there are some people that call something a swell driveway when really there's just nothing left of it. There's no,
Right, so
So that's part of, because they'll call it a swell driveway.
when you have a non-conforming, it would be difficult because you'd have to look at the 50% rule, I guess.
And then they're
It's a difficult enforcement issue, it really is. I don't know how to make that easier.
I'd like to see if there's something we could do to tighten that just a
It
little
does
bit.
become a question of fact.
If it's gravel, if it's asphalt, I don't think that would be too much of a problem.
No, it's when it's kind of the rock-grass combo.
Well, when it's a rock grass combo, they're still required to put the border on it, aren't they?
Well, that was one of the things that I had put in the original ordinances, that if somebody has a rock driveway now, a rock swale now, that if the rock is getting all over the place, that they're then required to retrofit and put in that.
Well, that would be a reasonable regulation that we could make sure is expressly in there if there's consensus of this. It's a little bit of a different issue, but it does
There's
help.
kind of 2 issues. One is the rock getting on the street and making sure it has the border, if that's a problem now. Not all of them have problems, they're packed. If they're not packed well, or they're the big rocks, they tend to go flying. But the other issue is what I call the P-rock kind of grass, or even the Chattahoochee. And that's where it becomes where there's not enough rock, and we can probably use the 50% deterioration to get around that. And that can be the argument.
The only other requirement I would like to see about existing non-conforming parking surfaces is that you still must have at least 3 feet from
Sorry.
the edge of the roadway for people to walk off the roadway. So somebody's on with a baby carriage, somebody's walking, there's enough room while the car is still parked there.
Okay, but that is a phenomenally great idea. Here's your problem with that. If there's a sightline issue, you can enforce it now, and then you can require it then after, if it's a safety issue. However, if the car is off the street, there's no sightline issues, and there's no real problem, you're then going to require somebody to then redo their driveway at a much greater
Well, we're not
cost.
talking about driveway, we're talking about a parking surface on the swale.
Correct, but you're going to have to have them redo that swale parking.
They just need to make sure they extend it by 3 feet. So if somebody's walking along the street and the car comes and they can't get off the roadway, because the car is parked there, That's a safety issue.
I know, but I think that should be done on a case-by-case basis based upon an issue of safety, and that be allowed the call of the code enforcement officer, and not make every single person who has a swale driveway have to redo that driveway. That's an enormous cost.
The easy safety issue there, if it's a site triangle, but what Commissioner Bill's saying is a little less certain, because you're saying that they have to have 3 feet to get onto the swale, and if a car is parked there, it doesn't give them the 3 feet, then that would be a violation, is what you're...
There's also no guarantee if you have 13 feet that that person's going to pull in and leave the 3 feet. We can make that a requirement, which is what we kind of already did in here for all new swale parking.
So what we're saying is that since that's a safety issue, for requiring it for new parking, it should require with old parking. It's not,
I'm just
that's my thought. I don't know
I'm just
anybody else.
concerned because of the, I don't know until we had how many homes that would impact and the cost. I would be concerned. I think it's probably,
Maybe, excuse me, but maybe we could ask code to see if that is an issue out there, and
Okay.
then we can try to see how we can address that.
well, just to give an idea of distance, parallel parking spaces in Miami-Dade County require 9 feet. If you add 3 feet to that, I'm talking 12. So you'd want most of them to be 12. And just to get an idea, some of our streets are only 15 feet wide, I'm just saying. And those are the streets where that becomes more of a problem. On streets that are wider, people can get out of the way because the road is wide enough. On streets that are very narrow, that's when it becomes particularly problematic, because then the streets are very narrow, the cars can barely get by, and then on top of that, you're parking very
Right.
close. Those are really where that becomes a safety issue, to me.
We've always said about people not bringing their vegetation down to the edge of the street so people can't get off. A BMW is just as difficult as vegetation.
Yeah,
It's a
118th
problem
Street,
where you can get
118th
off.
Street has the same problem,
Yeah.
you know.
So we'll just code to see what she thinks.
We'll see if there's some examples of that. And then, while we're on it, the rock swale border, is that something the commission wants for existing, to give them, I think we have a 6 months period, which we will address here a little bit later, time to put in a border for
I think we have 2 issues here.
yeah, we do.
Well, 3, but one of the main issues is people who rocked up their whole entire front. Okay? And how do we address that retroactively? The second issue is that if it's not a problem and it's not creating a hazard for the roadway, I'm also inclined not to make it a problem for a resident to have to make that expenditure. If, however, the code enforcement officer is saying that, rocks going all over the driveway, and it becomes a hazard to bicyclers and other people, or cars, then I think it can be enforced.
Okay, now, one of the things here that the border becomes important along the pavement is because as cars go off of it onto the rocks, it tends to crush the pavement and deteriorate the edges of the roads. If you have the border there adjacent to that, it helps preserve the roads, as well as preventing rocks from getting on the roads.
Can you find out how many properties, roughly, this would impact in the village?
We can
Approximately,
check.
yeah.
It's not going to be immediate.
No, but while
yeah.
she's going out anyway to look at the width of the swales, maybe at that point, because she's going to be going out looking at that anyway, we can have her do that as well. Because if it's going to affect, if we have 3,000 residents, it's going to affect, 25 homes, that's not a huge deal. But if it's going to be affecting hundreds and hundreds of homes, then that might change my perspective. Well, anybody else want to, I'm sorry, Commissioner Roth?
So we're on number 5? Existing non-conforming
Yes.
parking surface on the swale may remain as non-conforming structure until 50% deteriorated. Does that mean that those sites will not have to have a parking space on their property?
No, because and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Hearn, the whole first part of the thing says if you don't have a driveway, you got to put one in regardless, unless you're going to go through Section 5.7 and ask for administrative variance because you have a special condition.
I think it means that's true. If they haven't got a parking space on their property, they've got this, they don't have to put a driveway on their property.
Right, the way we have them allowed as existing non-conforming, if they meet under 5.6.21C, the 4 issues, which one of them does is parking on the swales, not create sightline or other road safety
Right.
issues.
So if you look
But-
at D, it's there, right?
But my understanding from the commission so far has been that if they have sufficient parking on that non-conforming, they don't have to put the driveway in immediately. That's always been our conversations, I understood them.
Yes.
Okay, but that's a little different than.
That's not my
All right,
understanding.
so we need to, we need to
My
have that clarified.
understanding is that there's sort of a priority of where you park your car. And number one, you park your car on your property, and whatever is developed in the swale after that, according to section 5, number 5 here, could remain in place until it deteriorates 50%.
And we can absolutely say that, but we don't, as of right now. Under D, 5.6.21D, we say property owners that do not have either a conforming or existing non-conforming parking surface, either off-street or on the swale, shall have 6 months from the date selected to install an approved parking surface.
35 properties.
But that does say
But that says-
on-street or off-street.
Right.
So if they have off-street and
If they have but if they have an existing non-conforming parking surface, either off-street or on the swale, then they don't need to do that until the
Right.
50%.
Correct, because we were talking about duplexes, were, for example, that they all have swell parking. That's what they have. And that we were not going to, I thought we were in agreement that we were not going to force them to then take away their swale parking and put in another driveway someplace else.
That's my understanding of our
That's what
conversation.
I thought we had already
But we
agreed
need to
on
make
last
that very, because that's
But-
the ultimate part of this ordinance, if you ask me, so we need to agree on
But I
this.
think if we want to address that, we may have to address it specifically, because if we leave it in one way, it'll be too broad, and it'll start to absorb other areas that I think that we're not saying. I think we need to take it case by case, because if we're saying, let's say there's a single-family house, they have room for a driveway, but they never put one in, and all they had was swale parking, are we saying that non-conforming swale parking, you can keep that, you don't have to put a driveway in, even though you have the space to do it on your property? It's like, I just want to take it step by step and make sure we're all saying.
I am
what
saying
we're-
that, yes. Because I thought we were not going to, we were going to allow people who already had existing swale parking to maintain their swale parking and not force them to put in a driveway in addition if they've already developed their swale. I think the issue becomes, to me, is if you have, and I don't want to mention any particular property, but let's say you have a very 50% deteriorated, then you would have to put in a swale, you'd have to put in a driveway, and you would have to eliminate your swale parking, or you'd have to develop it as one space at 40% with pervious, excuse
I
me.
thought Jenny would say I thought just the opposite. My thought had always been, is if you've got an existing swale parking, and whether you have a driveway or not, if you have existing parking on your swale, and it works, you do not have to put in a
Right,
driveway.
that's what I thought we'd agreed.
Yeah, that was my understanding of the conversation.
that's where I'm leaning.
before.
That's not my understanding throughout the whole discussion, because the way this was approached was to try to get cars off of the swale, off of the right-of-way, and onto people's properties. And then we took a step back and realized that, okay, there are some properties that just cannot accommodate the full complement of parking that would be needed for, depending on how many bedrooms are in the house. So in my way of thinking, all along the conversation has been, let's make regulation so that people park their cars on their property and allow for a special exception when that's an impossibility to meet because of the way the lot's configured or mature trees or whatever, drain field, different situations would fall into those exceptions.
So if you had swell parking for the last 20 years in your house, whether you're in a duplex or someplace else, and it's working for you, and you have all this stuff in there, you now have to go to an administrative hearing to say, I'm not going to make you put in a driveway? I don't concur with that. I think that's overreach.
Unless it's a sightline issue, I could understand.
Correct. If it's a
That's right.
sightline issue-
Right, you can still have your parking, that's what my thought was, you can still have your swale parking.
Well, here's the other argument. Let's say I have, and I'll use my house as a great example of this. I have off-street parking, and I have swale parking. Both are developed. Ideally, I wouldn't have made them that way, but that's what I bought the house, and that's what it is. Let's say theoretically I had insufficient off-street parking, and I decided to develop my parking further. Do I have to remove my swale parking? Why?
We're not saying remove this, at least that wasn't what I was saying. The swale parking can stay as long as it's less than 50% deteriorated. But the idea, the concept, for the last 2 years we've been talking about this, was to get people's cars off of that safety area where pedestrians can step off the road and to get them onto their own property.
I think I can say I concur with you on a couple of things on that, which is I do believe if you have a safety issue and you have a 9-foot side space, that you either have to increase your swale or change your parking, because it's a safety issue. But I also think that if you've had swale parking and that's been your sole parking and it's a nice surface and it's well-developed and we allowed you to develop it, I don't see why now I'd have to take your green space and turn it into a concrete piece and reconfigure your whole parking. I think that's overreach. I do.
Well, and then this is why I was earlier proposing that we maybe not impose it on people, the current owner, who may be an elderly couple and who don't have the means to do that, but at the time that the property changes title, then the new owner would have to bring it up to the new standard. And that new standard is to park your car on private property and not on the swale.
Okay, so let's have a consensus piece here now and see how many of you, does anybody believe that we have to basically change people who have swale parking and have them have the off-street parking if they have the lot to accommodate it? Does anybody support that? Because I do not.
I'm sorry?
I do not support forcing people to stick in a driveway if they have sufficient parking spaces and swale parking, and having them now have to put in a parking surface that gets it off-street if they've been using the same parking
Well,
space.
if you phrase it that way, then yes, it does possibly sound like an imposition, but if you phrase it such that every property owner's personal property should primarily be housed, kept, stored within their private property, and then allow for an exception for overflow or for those unusual circumstances, of which there are not many, it doesn't sound quite as onerous as the way you're phrasing it.
It may not sound as onerous, but it still is.
If you have to pay for it, it's onerous.
Yeah, right.
Well, I can
Do
see
what's
the way this
necessary.
conversation is going. I think, I'm happy if you guys work out an ordinance on the parking. I've worked on it for 2 years now, and everything that's been developed through the review board, through the public comments, through the workshops, through all of the other meetings that led to this point is being totally disregarded.
And I've had other people tell me the same thing about the ordinance that was then crafted. So I'm not going to concur, I can't concur with your consensus on that. I would think at this point, we have people right now whose, if their swale driveway, and there's a lot of properties right now whose swales driveways are below 50%, and they're going to have to do it anyway because they're at the 50% deterioration rate. And that's already going to be a major pushback as it is. I think there's also configurations of properties that, and I can think of one on 7th and 117th who has some off-street parking, but they also have all around their corner property, they have places to park. I don't think taking away from that does anything for them. So I'm not in support of it. I'm sorry, I'm not.
We had, when this survey was done last summer, we had 69 properties that had no driveway and only swale parking, or nothing at all. After reviewing the P&Z minutes from the last couple of months, we now only have 19 properties that have no driveway or swale parking surface at all, because for all of this discussion, people have been finding a way to put in the driveways the way that the current regulation exists. And we have only 12 properties that have no driveway but only swale parking surface. So we're making regulation for 12 sites in a village of 1,100 properties.
Okay, so if it's only 12 sites, then it's not going to impact enough people. I still don't think it needs to be done. I think
don't think we should make
the reverse logic is the same. It's 12
No, I'm
properties.
sorry, you're contorting the regulation in order to accommodate 12 or 12 and 19, 30-some-odd sites.
Well, it's not just me. We have 5 people here, so let's hear from everybody else.
It's not 12 and 19, it's 12. It's 12. If they don't have parking in either one, they've got to put some sort of parking in. They don't have existing swale parking now. Am I correct with the 19? It says no driveway, no swale.
No driveway or swale. They have no parking surface
They have no
whatsoever.
parking at all. So they have to put some parking surface.
Which means they're going to have to do off-street first.
Well, they have, no, they can do, first they have is, their first obligation is to put it on their property.
Right.
Right, they
Second
have to have-
obligation, if it doesn't work, then they can do the swale. So, but right now, we just have 12 that we're talking about. And the ones that I've seen are ones that really just don't have any place where it makes any sense.
So we're making regulation for 12 sites in a village of how many?
We're making an
We're
exception.
making the rule for them. We're not
No,
making
we're
the
making an
exception.
exception for 12.
No, make an exception.
No, we're making the rule for them.
Okay, one at a time, one at a time. Let's just move on, have a consensus on this, so we'll be all night on this. So
Okay.
what is the consensus on this?
All right, let's back up and state what we're actually taking a consensus on.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so we're on 5 with the 50% disrepair question of people that have existing swells. And I guess the answer is that these are 12 properties with existing swell parking. Of those 12 properties, there probably are some that, or a good number, that are probably over the 50% deteriorated. Of the handful that are left, do we have a consensus that those properties can keep that swell as long as it's not 50% deteriorated, if it's substantial parking for the cars that they have,
And it doesn't create a safety issue.
and it doesn't create a safety
Or
issue?
sightline
If-
issue.
If it's a safety or sightline, then they're going to have to conform. But if not, they can, and we're probably going to wind up with a handful, they can keep the swells as they have them.
As long as they're well-maintained, proper maintenance
As long as
issue.
it's
Right.
not the 50%
Well, we've always
issue.
had this, well, even if, let's say it's deteriorated by 50%, if that's the only place they can have parking.
Well, that's a
That's
different,
separate. That's a separate,
That's what I'm
that's a
saying.
separate,
If
that's
they-
5.7.
Well, come into that.
5.7 will take care of that.
Right.
We already have something there.
Fine.
If
Okay.
they have the space on their property to put parking on their property and their swell has deteriorated beyond the 50%,
They have to go back to square one.
they have to go back to square one. Whatever we've agreed, 40% of the swell can be developed, but they have to put the sufficient parking on their property.
Okay? Do we have a consensus on that?
I agree.
I agree. Vice
Yes, I
Mayor?
agree with that.
Commissioner Ross?
No. That's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be
And
writing code
Commissioner
for
Tudor.
the majority, not for the few.
Commissioner Tudor, you give me the last call. then.
I would agree with keeping, if somebody already has developed swell parking, allowing them to keep it until it deteriorates 50% or more, or if it's a safety issue. Some of the four criteria that was pointed out there in the draft. And I think one of the things that motivates me towards that is that, we're talking about residents who the village has pretty much, well, we don't have permits to be able to go back and look at, but for all intents and purposes, we're assuming that the village has allowed this parking for, 10, 20, 30 years.
More.
So, for those few properties, I'm fine with leaving language in there.
Okay. All right, is that clear? All right. So 6. Do we all agree they're providing abutting?
So we're accepting those 4 exceptions. We didn't talk about all of that. I mean,
Do you want to go,
there were,
okay, what did you want to go to? Commissioner Ross, what page are we went to, please?
we were talking about bullet point number 5 in the attorney's memo.
Correct, but where in the ordinance are you referring to 4 bullet points?
5.6.2.1C, I believe, is the
See,
4
thank you.
Okay,
criteria.
Mr. Hearn in the introduction got through telling us that what is purportedly a draft ordinance is not really the language that's going to comprise the final ordinance when it comes to us. But that's not what I'm hearing right now.
Well,
Right now, I'm hearing the 4 points and the exception and everything else, and
Well, we do
and
need to talk
code
about these 4
sections
points.
and-
If we do need to talk about the 4 points, if you're going to agree to the fact that you're going to allow non-conforming.
Okay, so that would, I'm still trying to find, I'm sorry.
So this is
What
page
page? 5?
2 of 11,
2 of 11, thank you, okay.
5.6.21C.
Okay, I got it, I got it, okay.
If we could just get some clarification, there was, at one point, it was said that you were discussing items on the village attorney's memo that was 1 through 5.
We were talking about 5, and then how to deal with 5 in particular, that's what the sub-discussion is about.
And the 1 through 4, those
That
were...
is on page 2 of 11.
Page
Commissioner
2 of 11.
Ross is requesting us to look at those specifically.
I'm sorry, I only brought it up because Commissioner Tudor brought up the 4 points.
This is
Okay.
language proffered by you, Mayor. So
Correct.
if this is something
So,
that
do
this,
you want me to speak to it?
that'd be great.
Okay. To allow the existing non-conforming swale parking surfaces, there were 4 conditions met. So the audience is on the same page, and everybody who's going to see this later. Existing developed swale parking surface is constructed of concrete pavers, brick, asphalt, gravel, or turf block, and 2, swale park-only parking provides sufficient parking surfaces to meet parking needs of current residents' vehicles. 3, existing parking surfaces on the developed swale is not beyond 50% deterioration. And 4, parking on the swale does not create a sightline or road safety issue. The only one I would look at and change or consider changing is the first one, because I think we've also allowed subsequent to that other materials. I think that you just need to make sure that we've covered those materials.
Is that what the commission agrees to? And then, I think we're looking to see if the commission agrees to
Okay,
that.
do we agree to these 4 conditions for them to remain?
Yeah. I agree.
I'm fine with those 4 conditions.
I'm fine, except for I think we should add, well, no, the gravel's there, never mind, yes. So you,
I'm fine with it, yes.
okay.
I'm withdrawing from the meeting. You can settle the ordinance as you wish. I've had 3 years of discussion over it, and rather than follow that path, new ideas are being introduced that were not part of the community discussion, that were not part of the committee review board discussion, and frankly, I've wasted too much of my life talking about it, so settle it up and pass your ordinance. Thank you.
Okay. For the record, it's not my ordinance. Next.
For the record, you drafted it.
Okay, so let's go to number 6. So first of all, did we all agree to those 4 points? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. 6, providing abutting property owner rights and obligations concerning swale parking. The concept here was to give people the right to stop people from parking in their swale just because they want to. The exceptions, of course, were emergency vehicles, anybody doing village business, but this gives some people a lot more comfort that if they're going to spend the money to develop their swale, they don't have to worry about who's going to damage it or whatever. And I know recently that's been quite an issue. So that was the intent of that clause that I put in.
I guess, what are the obligations?
What this is as well as, I think it was Commissioner Tudor, on the abutting property owners' rights obligation, this is where we will require them to indemnify, hold harmless. It's our property.
Right.
Cities do that when you even construct your driveway, indemnification and insurance. We're allowing them to use the public property, which is ultimately our property, in consideration for that duty and obligation and the hold harmless, that the property owner has what's termed preferential rights to use it. So they are able to park in that swale area immediately abutting, because they're the ones who are responsible for the maintenance of it, responsible for the liabilities of it.
And the safety issue.
And
that's a critical piece to me, is the safety
what
issue.
Chief Alschlager talked about that, because it's not an unknown car parked in front of your house. And so if that's, in fact, the car's there, we don't know who it is, we've asked them to move, there's actually a citation process that Miami, I'm trying to blank here, Miami Springs, I believe it is, uses.
I would support you bringing that back.
Okay.
I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
But does this, property owners have the rights regardless, even if they don't have swale parking? They do have the right to not allow somebody to park on their swale.
Well, based on, the swale technically is a right-of-way.
Right.
Yeah. So, if and this happens in many places, right? You have a party and someone parks in front of my house, I'm your next-door neighbor. I really have no authority to tow you if it's totally in the swale. It's the public. Now, what we've done here, if you actually improve that area at your cost and you hold us harmless and indemnify us and you're maintaining it, we give you preferential rights to say, no, this is my swale area, this is where I normally park.
But I think he has another point, which
My
was,
point
what
is-
happens if they park on the swale and it's a piece of grass and the car just leaves it there? Because I've had that happen to me several
Right.
times.
It's not my, I don't have any park, I don't have any swale
Can we put
parking.
language in there to
People
say
park
that
on
your
it.
swale,
I'm still required
Yeah.
to maintain it.
Yeah, so we could broaden that to preferential
Right.
rights, and I think that may be actually what Miami Gardens has done.
I think that is what they have done. It's
Yeah,
the whole
it
swale
is.
area, you have preferential rights to it, and it,
Because even if it's unimproved, you're mowing it and you're maintaining it.
yep, that sounds good to me. How does that sound?
No, that sounds fine, especially since it's the homeowner, that if there is any liability or anything happens,
Right.
it's all in the homeowner. You can't find that supposed neighbor or anyone else who parked on your swale to seek indemnification from them. So it makes sense to me, just legally, especially if we're going to be trying to enforce the parking as far as it being the 3 feet in and everything like that. If it's someone else on your swale and they're not parked properly.
Right. It just, I did remember reading through it, it seemed a little bit convoluted. If somebody's parking on my swale and I don't know who it is, my neighbor doesn't know who it is, I've got to still give them a notice that they should be parking there and.
Well, you're right. I mean, actually, the way it is, I think Miami, just drew a blank on the city again. It's a construction of a portion of a parking service is how they have it. So they limit it to probably construction, but if you're maintaining it, you could make that preferential. They make it preferential for those that have a swale because of the expense problem.
And I didn't like the construction part. I didn't understand why that was in there. I just
That's-
want to make it, because if not, I can tell you right now, I can name the company without naming it, that is already parking all over everybody else's swale. So, I knew you were going to smile on that one, because I get 3 calls a week.
We
on
can
people that-
we
please.
can broaden that based on the
Or
rights
maybe make it
of
a little
maintenance.
more, so the police do have the option of just issuing a ticket.
Yeah, let them immediately, if there's something going on, that they can take action.
Well, that can be done. I think the idea there is just, hey, I mean, I know this, but can you move the car? And they move the car, we're not sending a police officer
Well,
out.
right.
Yeah, that's the only reason I assume
yeah,
they
it's
did
more
that.
for if you ask
Yeah.
somebody to move the car.
If you
they
find
say-
them, that was the other problem I had. I had
If you
people
can
come,
find them, that's-
yeah, I've had people park in my swale for, 8, 10, 12 hours, and I can't even find them. So I don't want to make it a requirement, because the assumption is I can find whose car it is. Sometimes the police have to come because they have to run the tags to figure out who runs the car and so forth, but even then, it's not going to tell us if it's somebody visiting a neighbor or so forth.
Okay.
Or if it's an Airbnb and you happen to have,
Right, in code enforcement, giving a notice of violation doesn't do any good. If it's not somebody who lives here, it doesn't do any good.
it should be a ticket. It should be like a regular standard ticket, parking.
Yeah, the way that they do it in the other city with the code first, but the way you enforce it, this gives you the tools to enforce it several
Oh,
different
so
ways.
we do many- oh,
Yeah,
that's
I would
fine.
also suggest that if someone happens to be parked there and the police go out and they say they've been here for 10 minutes, unless they're worried about a crime, they
Yeah.
may allow,
Yeah.
this is not going to be their number one response.
Could you make it so that the language allows for flexibility in
Yeah.
enforcement?
Yeah, it's a discretion of the officer.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is as we move into the era of more Airbnbs and things like this, it becomes, can be more challenging sometimes. It may not be, but it may be. Or insufficient parking, there's a lot of that, too. Okay, number 7. I think everybody has agreed to 5.7 and the ability to have the only question I had was the best way to do that, whether or not we wanted a special magistrate to do it. I think we had talked about that a little bit, Attorney Hearn, or whether or not we wanted to do, who's to do that, the village.
Yeah, I mean, that's, there's different ways to do it, and it's really up to this commission. There's advantages to having an outside magistrate, the perceived objectiveness of it, and of course, there'd be a cost to it for a special magistrate as well, so.
I propose that we absorb the cost for the first 6 months, and after that, the costs get passed on. So in other words, anybody who already has, is going to apply for that exception, just like we had with the boats, or a year, whatever the time frame is. If you wanted to have, maintain your boat, you came and did an administrative hearing, and then you were given, or an RV, you were given that exception. I'd like to do a similar kind of thing for the property so they can apply for it, and initially no cost. And then later, if they're doing something else and they have to have an administrative hearing, then the cost gets passed on. Am I being clear?
Yes, you are. The initial, the way it initially proposed was actually that they would come to the village commission. Your meetings probably go late enough, so then you're looking at another option.
I would rather have a special magistrate than putting this on the commission,
Okay.
for
Nope.
two reasons. Number one, it's neighbor against neighbor, or neighbor deciding for neighbor. It makes it very, very unobjective.
Should we, I don't know, I'm not sure, what are we going to do? Let's say if somebody says, I've got 6 cars, I've got no room on my property, and I've got to develop 100% of my swale.
Well, we don't allow for that. We allow up to 40% as we move forward. Yeah.
Okay.
And if the
Or
criteria,
special exceptions, I guess.
I think your point is well taken, is do we have a criteria, just like we do for variances, do we have a criteria we can set that meets that exception so that it is a very objective component versus a subjective, yeah, you have a reason, that's a good reason. Is there a way to do that so that we're not,
Well, the actual special exception is from the off-street parking requirements.
lot size, which we knew, lot
Right,
configuration?
but it's not actually for the number of cars. So for example, we don't have a maximum, but we have I would tell you, in all cities, it's realistic. You know, if you happen to have 12 cars and you're in a small single-family home, yeah, it's not meant for that, and a lot of people put boats in storage and other things in storage. You might have to put, if you're a car guy, you may have to put some cars in storage, is how other cities have dealt with it.
So we do have the ability to say, no, you just have too many cars to park there.
That's right. I mean,
That's-
Excess vehicle.
based on your inability to fit.
Right.
Yeah.
On the parking surface, right?
You know, no different than if somebody had extra furniture and they just felt it was good to be in the front lawn. I mean,
Right.
it's single family, it's residential.
Okay.
So this one, you spoke about, I have it here, about allowing parking and swale during national holidays and allowing for a permitting process to park and swale during special events.
Since I wrote that, can I tell you why I wrote it, and then see if that is something that you all are amenable to or not? This came about for a couple of reasons. One of them was Airbnbs, and the idea that we are very limited legislatively of how we can deal with that. But if you have excess cars or excess parties on a regular basis, that can be a problem, whether it's an Airbnb or whether it's just somebody who likes to have a college dorm, have, 12 kids renting it, and now we have parties all the time. So the idea was to come up with some limitation to allow people the right to do whatever, pretty much what they want with their own property and have parties, but it's not an everyday event and it's not imposing on the neighbors. We don't have a serious problem here with that now. We don't. I do think there are a couple people that have it, but it's not a serious problem. But I wanted something in there just in case we had an issue coming in with Airbnbs or some other dormitory, because other cities have had the problem with college students and Airbnbs. That's why I brought it forward. It may be overkill, you can decide, but. And that's why I put the maximum requirement of a certain number of a year. I'm not fixed to any of that details, just the idea that we don't have one person being imposed. I also lived in South Beach, so I understand what it's like to live in an environment where that can be a continual problem. So the idea here was to keep the single-family zoning laws that would help maintain the quality of life here for everybody.
Yeah, I think that what you have in there about damages to the property too, to preserve the swale area, you know who did damage it. So I don't know if it's needed or not either, to be quite candid. So it's up to the commission whether you want to regulate that or wait and see if it's needed and bring it.
I mean, you can wait and see. I mean, I'm not, the other issue was, for me, was how do you deal with the swale, the median issue, if we don't want people parking on the medians? I guess now's not the greatest time to discuss that, since our medians are having a very hard time at the moment. But when our medians were pristine and lovely, and they will be again, how do you protect those medians and median parkways? How do you stop them from having any type of major damage?
And I have that needs to be addressed completely. Whether that's later on in my memo, that's number one on the needs to further direction. Whether to allow parking on the medians under limited circumstances for special events. So right now, we do not allow parking on the medians. That's our code.
We don't allow it.
Actually, we do allow it for special events. We have a special event permit.
For medians?
For medians, yes. And so,
Let me put it this way, we don't allow it by ordinance, even a special,
regular
but we
basis.
may do it by practice. but there's nothing in the code that I know that allows.
Right, and I do have special permits, I thought, for utilizing the medians, not for parking on them.
For what?
For utilizing the meeting for events, not for necessarily parking on them.
That, we'll have to review that then, because that's the way it's been done historically for as long as I've been here, even
Okay.
before, so, okay.
Definitely, there's definitely a use issue, so.
There's a disconnect.
Is there a discussion?
I would say 8 is fine then, if that's, we remove 9, are we back to what numbers are we on?
So you okay with 8?
Yeah,
8 as it is, allows parking on swell during national holidays.
The idea that is you can park on the swales, not the medians, but on the swales, whether it's your own property, and then the question then becomes, you can't park on somebody else's swale, because
Right.
so you park all the swale you want, nobody will give you a hard time on grass or whatever if you're having an event on your house and your property. And then if you need additional parking, you can ask for permits to park on the median. That was the idea. It's the practice anyway. This way, at least we have some way to control to make sure there's no damage to it. That's just a thought.
I mean, I think it's fine because also if we're regulating the amount of the swell that's developed for a parking surface, if we're saying that all cars must be parked on a parking surface, as to avoid people not having issues of citations or what have you during their parties, I think that we would have to have something like this in place. Also, on top of that, if we are in the near future, I hope, we're looking at improving our medians, we do want to start to curtail parking on medians because right now I'm sure we don't really know how we're developing the medians, whether or not parking even makes sense, and people destroying things that would be in the median. So I think we need to start that education and making it possible for people to use the swales that abut their property for the holidays and events and things like that.
And I know we've just finally, until recently, until the storm, we were having everybody off the medians. I mean, people were off the medians. Now, it's a little bit of a challenge, just because there's so many workers.
you need to have something, because I was probably a little different than somebody who was at a party. It was last night, and there were all the cars parked in the median.
So-
if they need a permit for it and they come in and say, this is what we're going to do, we can just make sure that's, but I think you do have it addressed there somewhere else.
No, actually, that's what I want to talk about. So if we're going to allow parking on the medians, that would be a change of what the actual law says, maybe not in practice, but we could just reflect the practice
Right.
that you'd get a special exception to park on the medians.
For certain events, 4 times a year is how I have it currently written, just so everybody's aware. If you want to change the details of that, you can, but I had 4 times a year. You can make it 6 times. I'm trying to keep them off the median, so I
Yeah,
limited it to 4.
I agree. I'm trying to curtail the parking on the median, and I kind of don't want to go down a slippery slope.
Do you want to do twice? Do you want to have no parking on the median? Your problem with that is they're going to park on the medians if they have a party.
Right.
So then the question is, how do you...
Exception.
Right, so how do you at least minimize the damage? If they go into Village Hall and they say, I live on 120th Street, and I can fit, I'm going to have 40 people over, I want to park 40 cars on the median, at least you know.
Right.
Right, and
Versus if somebody-
currently,
Because it allows you to monitor
okay,
somehow.
what we do is we go out prior to their event, and we look at the median, snap photos of it. We hold a check or cash for, I think, $250, depending on what it is, and then we check it after the event. If there's no damage to the median, we just refund the money. If there's damage, then we keep that and use that to repair it. So,
Okay, so do we have a consensus in the language that's already written? And you can take a moment to read it. Attorney Hearn, if you'll give me that page,
The
because
section.
I should know it, right?
I don't think I have the median in here. 'Cause I didn't think
Did
I
you
had-
take it
I didn't
out?
ha- Well, I didn't have support for that until just now, so
Right.
I could look at that.
I think you
Sure.
put it, here it is. I think you put it here already. Nope.
It may be frocked, but whatever it is, I can,
Yeah, I had the language in the other one that I did.
Okay,
You can look
yeah.
at it, or
Right, 'cause
find a
as it
language
is
that's
right now,
appropriate.
parking in median prohibited, I think, under 5.6.5.
Let me ask the village manager, have we had a issue with people pulling permits, special event permits, parking in the median, and there being some type of major destruction or anything along those lines?
no, actually, I've got to say, the people that actually come in and ask and pull the special permits, we've never had any problem, as far as I'm aware, of any damage to the median. but they're, by nature, I think they're probably the most responsible.
Because they're coming in and asking.
Exactly. It's the people that just throw the wild kegger.
Well, I mean,
And,
that's why
all their friends park on the median and, and that sort of thing.
Well, that's why I like to memorialize what's being done in practice into an ordinance. That way, if somebody who does not pull a special event permit, we can actually have some teeth if there's issues with that.
Especially if there's damage to the median.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we can look at the
Yeah.
fines and look at the levels and all that to see what's appropriate.
But for the residents who are having the occasional
Yeah.
once, twice a year party and they need to park in the median, I have no problem with that right now. Now, if we come up with a master plan where we're developing these medians into something, that is not
Right.
going to work well with cars parking on it, then we can,
Well, and that will be, and the nice
Address
part
it
about
then.
that is, if, let's say, we develop a median on one street and another one's not developed, well, they can walk a block. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll come down to,
Availability.
availability and things like that. You may also decide that you want to, if it's near the park, there may be alternatives to help people out to make sure they have a place to park their cars, which is always a challenge in an older developed neighborhood. But a way to try and accommodate the residents, at the same time mitigate any damages. Okay, so we're in a consensus to move forward with 8?
Yes.
Yes?
yeah.
Okay. 9, removed requirements providing a maximum number of vehicles allowed. Does everybody agree with that at this point? I do?
Yes.
Yeah, just remove that.
Could you expand for me on number 10, Attorney
Yes.
Hearn? Because I think one of the issues I had looking at this was corner properties are different. They're always different. They're treated
Yes.
different on fences. They're treated different in every way. So, and this is what I wasn't clear on, so maybe you can help me in this. I don't want to see one, because if you look at a property, and my property is a corner property, and I have a huge amount of stuff, but I also have a fence there, but not everybody has that. So you could use the front or the front side.
Yes.
I don't want to see one parking, because 40% of that whole thing, either way, could be 2 parking spaces if I have 100 feet wide. It's 2 parking spaces if you're in a corner property. But they have the room for it, so I don't care. My issue is, I don't want one on one side and one on the other. I only want them to pick one side to develop that parking.
And that's why I provide corner side clarification. That's my question to you.
Or wraparound parking, which we see a lot in some of the properties. We have properties that actually have wraparound driveways the whole way.
So you're saying that vehicles parked shall not exceed 40% of the front yard or corner side yard, if applicable, but not both?
Correct.
So you've got to pick where you're putting your driveway.
Pick your side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I
Now,
thought it was, and that's why I put clarification.
The only challenge of that also is the duplexes. But I personally think most corner properties, mine included, and most everybody's I know, has more than enough stuff to put stuff off-street. So I don't think it'll become an issue.
Well, if it does, then there's a process.
This wasn't what this discussion was originally, if I remember. I agree with what we're saying now. This was about 40% of their side yard being paved or not paved, and I didn't like that idea at all. But saying 40% of front or side is perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, one or the other. Right,
Right.
not both. So we're all in agreement on that?
Yes.
Okay. Distinguish landscape rock from allowable gravel surfaces. I think this needs a great deal of discussion. We have, and I'll just speak to what I found. We have a new theme, which is we take P-rock and we gravel up everything, and your parking surface is not defined. I, of course, in the ordinance that I crafted, I did smaller P-rock. I said they could, like the Key West look, where they roll it out and they pack it in and it doesn't move, it becomes a surface. We have a couple houses in the village that have very canopied houses, and there's nothing that really goes underneath, so they rocked up the front, and it looks fine. And we have other people that rocked it up, and it doesn't look fine. It's an aesthetic issue. But, having said that, many folks have expressed to me, many residents have expressed to me that they don't share my opinion on that, and they don't want to see a completely rocked up front driveway with no vegetation. So a lot of it had to do with vegetation. Like, how much vegetation are you going to put in that area that's rock? So then the discussion was, when I talked to, please help me with the name, gentleman Skip?
Skip Marjoram?
Yes. He suggested, and I thought it was a good suggestion, that you distinguish between your landscape rock and your parking surface. Okay? So that And the other alternative, the other third thing I heard was, okay, allow the rock driveway, but then you have to have another material. So it's not all one thing. So I'm bringing this up as a discussion point. I've gone back and forth with this a bunch of times. The one thing I think is absolutely critical is that you distinguish your parking surface so that you can know what an approved parking surface is. Because if you just put rock on it, nobody's going to know.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the things I was doing over the last couple of days was playing with the language that was in this draft that the
Did you?
attorney proposed. And one of the things I had put down regarding the driveway was, and I don't know if this would be clear enough, but, somebody putting language in there, no parking shall be permitted in the unpaved portion of front yard or any private property. All vehicles must be parked on a designated approved parking surface. So I don't know if throwing that language in there,
So could you repeat it for me, please?
that all vehicles must be parked on a designated approved parking surface. Now, I don't know if that's enough to give the village, if somebody is graveling their whole yard,
It's not.
to be able to, and that's the
Right.
question, how do we, if somebody has to designate an area for their parking
Well,
surface, that's
Skip-
where you have
Skip-
to park.
Skip's suggestion is that if you put a border on it all the way around, which is required anyway,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you would know that's the parking surface. Okay, so you'd have a border around it. Having said that, it's going to look really kind of stupid if I've got a rock driveway to put a border around it, and then on one side is the same rock that's on the other side. It just is kind of,
Not to interrupt you.
Please.
Madam Mayor, but I think I brought it up the last meeting that, and it sounds like it's what, well, I'm not sure if it's what Skip's saying. I brought up during last meeting that we definitely have to differentiate between landscape rock and rock that will be accepted as an approved surface for parking.
Okay.
I don't think there's any other way besides that. Like you even mentioning just now, putting the borders, like you said, code is not going to know which side is the parking surface or not if there's just a border. Plus, if we're kind of trying to curtail the amount of cars by saying that cars must be parked on an approved surface, whatever the dimension of that surface is, and if the car doesn't fit on the approved surface, then you can't have another car. So, or you have to find out what to do with that other car because it won't fit on what you have approved. So the people rocking up their front lawn is an issue because it seems like they kind of found the loophole to have more cars parked in front of
or more flexibility in the parking.
Flexibility, because the parking surface code is not going to be able to differentiate which is which.
I think the issue is, we still want people to have green in their front yard.
And I was going to touch on that too. Not
The
being
original
grass.
meaning of the 40% impervious was for water drainage. It was nothing to do with parking, it was just water drainage. So why don't we make a minimum amount of green landscaping in your front yard? Which would be 25%, 30%, which could also include decorative stone around trees, possibly. But let's just say, you have to have at least 30% of your front yard has to be landscaped.
I think the way around this is going to be a little simpler, which is most people are choosing P-rock. That's what they're using. They're using limestone. If you make the driveways allowed to have the smaller P-rock, which is fine, I think for me, that's not a problem. But on the outside of that, okay, they can have another rock, but there has to, if you want to make a minimum amount of green, you can, but the question is, what is green? What is ground cover? It's a landscape ordinance issue. It's not a driveway ordinance issue.
But then it should refer to the landscape in here, because we don't want to give somebody the landscape the driveway issue and say, this is what you need to do for your driveway. Oh, wait, but we didn't mention that here. You have to look somewhere else.
Well, right, but we need to have this somewhere else to look, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if there's and I didn't easily find it, but if there's a definition of what landscape rock is.
There isn't, by the way. I
that's
looked everywhere under
okay.
the sun, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you what it really means, having been to Olimar and spent my life on rock
Right.
for my house. I have a thing about rocks. River rocks, Chattahoochee rock, the white Chattahoochee versus yellow Chattahoochee. That is all a decorative stone. There's different sizes of it. There's bigger parts of it. There's also slate, like gray slate, which is the more rough. Okay. People want to use that for driveways as well. Okay. So the question is, if you have a driveway that is rock, The question then becomes, how much other material and what kinds of other material? If it's different or complementary, but not hard-packed, it would break it up some. And this is where I'm not a landscape architect,
My apologies.
but I'm concerned about, I'm also concerned about over micromanaging aesthetics. So I'm trying to make it reasonable.
And I guess that's where it comes in is to what is greenscape or what is landscaping, because I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, like, if you like the Arizona decor and you
Right.
put the black Mexican rock or whatever it is
River
on
rock.
your river rock on your property, then what is landscaping? Or we say, and I think I agree with Commissioner Bilt that we have to put it in the landscape ordinance. If you're going to rock up your front yard, this is the certain types of landscaping that you need to put in there to kind of complement it, so it's not just a rocked up front yard and you have absolutely no trees, no bushes, no nothing. I think if we do that and then also have the limited amount of rock that can be used as a driveway surface, hard packed or whatever it is, with borders.
Well, and some of it's not hard-packed. There are people that did
Right,
Chattahoochee driveways, which are loose rock.
Whether it is, but if we make a policy or a rule or a law that you have to have the borders starting there.
Okay.
And the rock that you're using for your driveway is not the same as the rock that you're
It has to be-
using.
it has to be-
It has to be different.
Different color and different in texture, and different,
Right.
you
It
can find ways to do
complement,
it.
but it has to be different. And then deal with the landscaping issue in the landscape ordinance and have it it has to refer back.
The
I
only-
do agree that it has to show up somehow in the.
But here's my question. This is what gets interesting. We don't require people now with the landscape ordinance to review their entire landscape if they're putting in a driveway. And now, you kind of are doing that. So that's the other challenge to this. Attorney Hearn, jump in here.
Yeah, I do think there'd be some value in having some landscape expert to weigh in, either volunteer that someone, I mean, this is not my subject matter expertise.
There you go.
I learned that from FEMA.
I think instead of going back and forth between the different size rocks, you must maintain at least 40% green landscape in your front yard.
And then
If-
again, it would be helpful to hear landscape expertise talk
I would
about
think- I
that.
would
yeah.
think-
Define green. Are you talking about ground cover, or are you talking about shrubs? Or are you talking about
Either.
tree
I
cover?
don't care if it's green. It doesn't make any difference.
Well, it does, because if I have 40% tree canopy coverage from one large oak, I've now met my requirement, and I can rock up the rest of my driveway.
See, I don't have so much of an issue, I mean, maybe because I'm just a simple country boy, but I don't have much of an issue with an entire rocked-up front yard. But what I would like to see this ordinance do is, if somebody's going to put in a driveway, we know exactly where the driveway is, what the driveway is, and if they're parking off that, it's a violation. And I'd like to actually have the driveway limited to no more than 40% of the front yard. And so if you're parking cars across your entire graveled front yard, you're in violation.
As I said, the 40% was for water drainage. That's where the figure of
And
40%.
and that's where it has, I think, gotten a little confusing, is that we talk about this driveway and 40% has to be impervious, and so people are like, well, I can do anything with my entire front yard. A lot of municipalities limit you. Albertao does 33% of your front yard can only be a
And I
driveway
think
can only
Miami
be-
Shores does too. Yeah.
And so it's a very limited amount, and I think the pervious, impervious 40%, I think, has gotten a little confusing. I would just do, you know, parking surface shall not exceed 40% of the front, in the front yard. And let's.
And then I have another question on that, just to make clarification. And I wasn't sure in the ordinance, the way it was written, Attorney Hearn, was that the approach can't be a different material than the driveway for new driveways.
Any material on the swale area used for parking must be compatible, harmonious with any driveway on the property, is how we came.
No, for the swale, but the approach to the driveway has to be the same material that the driveway's in.
Oh,
That should be consistent.
And if
Yeah.
it's not,
Approach
I would like
swale.
consensus for that.
My thought is, it was originally another surface because they planned to do it for people who didn't have driveways that went all the way down to the street, so they could get by with the ordinance by just putting gravel. It says gravel construction, as long as it meets gravel construction.
Okay, do it again for me, Harvey, one more time.
Okay, the thought is, if you had a parking surface that was your driveway, and it only went to your property line,
Which mine does.
right, only goes to
And
the
I have a
property
piece of asphalt down it that somebody put.
Right, so people, it only went to the property line. In order to make sure going across the property line, the swale, it was just not dirt, you could put in gravel. That was something that Park and Parkways put in. I disagree.
I don't agree with that. I think it should be the same material all the way down.
The original ordinance said, the one from 30 years ago or 50 years ago said, the driveway has to be all similar material. If in fact you want to let people put in something
Yeah.
now, say, fine, you can do it now. First 6 months of the ordinance, you can use gravel.
No, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I think
But
we
I
should
don't
be all
agree
the
with that.
same.
I'm not really thrilled with that either.
I think if you're going to, we're doing a driveway ordinance, let's do this the right way. The material should be the same. You don't want to P-rock for 3 feet, because my driveway it's terrible looking. It's got asphalt, that's broken up nasty, and then it goes concrete.
I guess that depends what everybody thinks. Do we think the same way?
That's a good question. So,
I mean, I want it to be the same
okay.
surface for the approach, because
I mean, it would make sense for it to be of the same material,
I-
the driveway
I would like to
approach.
see-
So
When
same
you put a
material.
driveway in, that's the way it's been in the park for 70 years. You put a driveway in, the driveway goes from your home to the street, it's all one material.
yeah.
So, and this is for the part of the swale that's going to the driveway itself?
Yeah, the approach.
Right.
Yeah,
the
approach.
because you can still do 40% of the swale area
Be
developed for parking.
compatible.
And
Yeah.
that would just be compatible.
Correct.
Right, and I guess the only question and the only strange part comes, if you have an apron, and then you're putting a nice abutting swale parking, and you're developing it, and that has to be pervious, and this is not going to be pervious, and it has to be compatible, the question is, what do you do with that one little piece of approach? In my opinion, leave it the same as the driveway, and the rest of it will be.
Well, yeah, what we say, other than the driveway approach on the swale, any other development must be pervious. So the driveway approach on the swale for the driveway, if the driveway's impervious, it's okay. Yeah.
It's impervious too, right?
Okay.
It's still once a-
Okay.
That's,
Do we have consensus on that?
yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. 12.
12,
Harvey, that was kind of yours.
this is
Do you
pretty
wanna talk about
straightforward.
that?
I think we even did it at the last
Yeah.
meeting.
We all
Crossed it
agree. I think
out.
we all
Yeah.
agreed on that.
Minimum setback for renovations, increasing square footage, parking surface by more than 20.
That was your suggestion?
That was your suggestion,
Commissioner
Harvey.
Belt? That's if you're simply increasing the square footage of the parking surface by 25% or more.
You didn't have
It
to
didn't
change the
have.
whole driveway.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't have to move the whole driveway, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's- If somebody's driveway who's right against the property line, they can keep it the same.
I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Because they're not increasing the square footage, they're just replacing what's already there.
okay. The following items need to be addressed and direction given, whether to allow parking on the medians under limited circumstances. I think we already covered
You
that.
addressed that.
Okay. Whether to allow 6 months or more from the date of enactment of this ordinance to install approved parking surfaces on all properties that do not have either a conforming or existing non-conforming parking surface prior to enforcement. Was it the time frame you were looking for?
Yeah, you had spoken about 6 months, but I don't think the commission, the commission, as a commission, did not say that's what we want, 6 months, we want.
The only thing I was concerned about was the 6 months from installation all the way through. As long as they took out the permit, we're doing the work. Do you want the final? Is that reasonable? I don't know. Is that a reasonable time frame?
6 months from what time?
Yeah, I mean, depending.
From the ordinance being executed. Is how it's proposed, I mean, is how the conversation was.
I'd like,
Well, and
you have to
then
communicate it
it's
to everybody,
getting,
too.
yeah, that's what I was going to
That's the
say. It's
other
getting the
problem.
communication out there to everyone.
That's why I raised it, so we can change it.
So-
Let's,
Maybe 12 months is probably
A year?
more realistic.
Yeah.
12 months works for me. That's what I originally thought it should be,
If that's, is that the consensus?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go with
given
that.
how our communication is.
Is there anything else? I don't believe this. We've actually,
You know, I had a
I have some things. Go ahead, Mike.
had a question.
Go ahead.
Going back to one of the ones that we agreed upon way back when, item number 1 about the 25% with the renovations.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to, I don't know if we want to include specific language in there about any type of new construction or renovations that increase occupancy. Because
Yes.
the 25% could, the only reason I was thinking is I could see somebody being like, wait a minute, I've expanded my kitchen and a family room, there's no additional.
I think we did, I think the way we worded it, at least that was the intent, was to word it so that, and this comes back to the bigger problem, which I was going to bring up, so thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
If I have a duplex that started off as a 2-1 and increased to a 4-2 or a 5-2, some cases, I have big, huge trees that have grown up that are now taking up, and I can only park 2 cars. The issue to me of square footage in the front, okay? I don't want people who are, here's my concern. There's a lot of people flipping houses in the park, which is great, and helping fixing them up, that's fabulous. But if you turn a 2-1 into a 4-2 on a property that doesn't have the frontage to afford the parking, this is a real problem because the neighbors now have to live with it. And we have examples of that throughout the park.
But as you increase bedrooms, at least up to the 4th bedroom, you do have to increase your parking spaces.
Right,
But if they don't have the frontage, then the way the
Oh, I'm
language...
sorry, okay. You're talking
If
about
they
frontage.
don't have the ability to do that, then they should not be given the permit to do the expansion. And I think that's how it's worded now. I just want to be clear from everybody here
Well,
that we
that
agree
would
on
be
that.
your ordinance that I didn't address that part. 'cause
It's in
you-
here.
But you haven't spoken on it, so we need to speak on
Right,
that.
that's why I'm
Yeah.
bringing it
Yeah.
up. Can we find, let me find the
So,
language.
I think
it
the,
would be my understand, if I'm understanding correctly, if you have sufficient lot size right now on the front of your property for the right amount of parking for your 2-2 that you're in right now, it's increased to a 4-2, and you have to add more
Space,
parking.
yeah.
But now your frontage can't fit it. It can't even fit it, let's say, under, it just can't fit. It can't fit it under an exception either unless they concrete the whole front yard, which we
Have the
don't
variance,
want.
right.
So therefore, we shouldn't allow the expansion of that house to increase. They can increase the size of the family room or the kitchen, but they shouldn't then increase the occupancy because unless they knock down the house and start over by having a further setback, they're not going to be able to accommodate the parking.
We do have one house like that on 115th between 10th and 11th, which was was it a,
You're talking about the duplex that's 5-2?
yeah, now it's a 5-2.
It's now a 5-2. It has an enormous tree on one side. It's lucky if it can get 2 cars in it. And it's a duplex. It's a 3-2 and a 2-2. I think that's correct. And there's no way it's going to ever have parking in it. And they advertise that we blessed it.
so I think actually, there's 2 parts to this, because if I think Commissioner Tudor was saying if you only increased your kitchen, you wouldn't have to do anything.
Yeah, the 25%.
And that's a different question than your question.
Should be it's a bedroom living, it's
Yeah,
a
it needs to be
sleeping.
something that increases
It's
occupancy.
occupancy.
Because there's,
It's not,
It is an occupancy issue.
right, it's not the size. It's not just, oh, I increased by 25%.
Yeah,
No, I
exactly.
increased my occupancy twofold. I had a 2-bedroom, now I have a 4.
Do we want to call it occupancy or bedrooms?
It's really bedrooms,
It's
because.
bedrooms, because you can't regulate
Right,
occupancy.
bedrooms.
Do we have anything in our code, or is there anything that says you must have enough parking for the cars that are normally resident on the property?
Well, this
Or
is
is
our
there any- I don't
parking
even
code,
know how
so.
you-
That's the surface, that's
Yeah,
the
that's the
that's the whole
surface.
point of the
Surface,
surface.
okay.
The surface is being used to do
Because
that.
theoretically, somebody could expand the house, put 7 bedrooms in.
Right.
Not now, because in this regulation, it will not let them do that if they don't have sufficient parking. And I think,
Well, we need to, we need to speak about that so you have clear direction to me
Correct.
to do this. So the way we had it was if you increased square footage 25% or more, you had to develop an off-street parking. But I think what you're saying, at least as I'm hearing, if you just increase your kitchen and living space, you're not going to require off-street parking,
right.
even if it's not there? Because they're non-conforming. I just want to be clear, because
Oh,
you guys spoke
okay,
about it.
Okay, so that backs up 2 questions.
Yeah.
Which is, the other thing we have to discuss, which is part of this, is how many spaces per bedroom. Because ultimately
Yeah, but
that...
this is, right, but
Okay.
this is the question without bedrooms. If you are going to redevelop your property by, I guess in theory, you could do 75%.
If you can afford $100,000 or $200,000 renovation to a home,
Put the parking in.
you ought to be able to put the parking.
Well, that's what we did agree upon, but Commissioner Tudor's is
Question whether or not you do
questioning
that.
that, and that's why that needs to be confirmed or not. Because I think you recognize we confirmed it before, now you're bringing it up. And then you have a second issue of occupancy, but let's do this one first, because
Okay.
I don't want to lose this, and then,
Okay,
yeah.
absolutely.
So that's what you're saying.
Commissioner Tudor, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what my issue was making sure that, that we're tackling the issue about occupancy, not just, I don't think necessarily the square footage or
Well,
the percentages.
I'm going to,
But if the house did not already
Talk
have a
about your
driveway,
example.
we increased it, somebody
That's right.
increased it by 25%, and let's say they expanded, made, a phenomenal man cave and everything else.
always a man cave. There's no such
Well,
thing as a woman
well,
cave.
I can dream.
Just say it.
I can dream about
She
that.
shed, I think it's called.
She said,
But if somebody develops that,
well,
they still, they're still going to have adequate parking. Absent that, they're still going to have adequate parking on.
there's a couple
you know.
different issues here, kind of, because it's interesting. Commissioner Bill, before you even were considering running, you had brought up to me an issue, and you want to discuss about your neighbor and the
Well,
property?
one of my neighbors put up a building, which is a studio as such, which has not space for 9 workstations.
So they created a business, a home
But
business.
that's what my thought is, it would have to be a bid. Why would you have 9 workstations if you have a mother, a father, and maybe 3 kids?
So while it's not a bedroom, the daytime parking will have increased significantly.
Well, but that's
But
a
they're not allowed
violation of our,
to- right.
that's
That is a
home-based
violation of something else,
occupancy, which is
right.
not supposed to increase traffic.
Right.
Okay,
And my thought was that was something that.
That's covered by separate ordinance.
Planning and zoning
Okay.
passed.
I understand, but.
okay, well, that's,
Yeah.
So that, and also, for example, I know my house, the Florida room at one time was outside, so it was enclosed, maybe 40, 50 years ago, and that was an additional 200 square feet. And the house was probably 1,500 square feet at the time. Then we also added in the back a cabana, which is another 300 square feet. So theoretically, over time, the size of the house has increased substantially with no need for additional parking, because if you have a big living room, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah,
So
no
I
need-
see what your point is, that does make sense.
And even if there was no parking to begin with, no adequate, the issue, if there's no adequate parking, doesn't matter whether or not they increased it 25% or 5%.
Right.
If there's no adequate parking, they would be in violation of this ordinance.
was adequate-
Because they're parking on an unapproved surface.
Okay.
Sarah increased her price, her house, because they put in the big kitchen, and that must have been 50% of the size of the house. They put in a huge kitchen and a huge living room.
I understand your point, and it's well taken, and we don't want to create an expense for somebody who doesn't need it.
Right.
My problem is oftentimes people will convert things, not in a legal way, by increasing the square footage and saying the use is one thing, and I have several examples of this, and when in reality, it's being used for living space. So one of the reasons why I was leaning towards the 25% and making sure you have sufficient parking, it can be reviewed at that point. But if you're increasing something and it can be turned into a bedroom, it will be. And that's the other, in some instances. And so this is a tough piece. There's no real one in this, because if you have illegal conversions, which we have in the park, and trying to regulate that is very difficult. So I understand your point as well.
I mean, I think there's a difficulty regulating that, and all we can do is try to put things in place that, one, are not so overburdensome for residents, but also that we can control. And, I mean, if people are doing it the proper way and they are just increasing a kitchen, you're not going to live in a kitchen. Increasing the living room, I guess technically you could have someone staying there, but I think there needs to be a differentiation that if they're increasing the property 25% and it's only the kitchen that they've increased, they should only need to put a driveway in. If they had none to begin with, they don't have an existing swale.
What if it's a ribbon driveway? I'm just giving examples. What if you have a ribbon driveway in a house, they put a $200,000 remodel? I'm just giving examples. Would we want them to put in a new driveway? Or somebody who had just had swale parking, which we permitted, now they've done a huge remodel, okay? And then do you want them to put off-street parking? I'm giving examples just to explain the
Well,
complexity of this. And then my third example is what if you increase and make separate rooms that you don't call bedrooms and call them an office? That's the problem for me.
Well, you can't, it's difficult to write regulation to try to catch every wrongdoer. I mean, people are going to, let's say I'm putting in a family room addition, it's going to come by, there's going to be an inspection done, it's going to get signed off on, and then they're going to sneak a week later and put in a standing closet and make it into a bedroom. You know,
I have a problem with...
There's no way to really catch that.
Well, I think that's why the ordinance should be strict enough that you force the parking issue up front when you're doing this. If you can make a $200,000 remodel, you can put in a parking space. It's a couple $1,000s. It's not, you're talking about 25%. So let's say you have an average house is, let's say, 1,700 square feet. And now I'm going to increase it by 25%, okay? You're talking now to make it 2125. So you go from 1,700 square feet to 2125. It's 400 square feet. Do you want to change the percentage?
If it's not a bedroom,
If it's an office or a separate room, I think it should be whether it's called a bedroom or not.
Well, for me, I believe it has to do with occupancy.
right.
Sticking to a percentage, I'm not comfortable with that. So I know where I'm at on this issue, so I really think it's really more for the three of y'all to kind of discuss where y'all are at with it.
It's, if I've got a 3-bedroom home and we have 6 people living, we're 2 people in each bedroom. Now we have 6 cars. We need to have parking space for 6 cars. Bottom line is, you have to have parking space. If your car is there and it's not parked in the space, great, so you get a ticket every single day.
You're chasing the tail. I'm trying to avoid it in the first place.
I don't think we can.
I think the compromise to me is if they're creating a separate bedroom or a separate room, period. Room.
And the reason I don't think you can do that is, across the street from where we are, they're putting in townhouses, 2 and 3 bedrooms. They're required to have 1.5 parking spaces per apartment.
That's
That's it.
what,
One and
that's
parking
North
spaces.
Miami, that's not here.
That's North Miami, so I'm saying if they're doing it, is it being done more strictly somewhere else?
We are different. We're not this is zoned differently. We
Yeah,
have
but
a
I'm saying,
different
so
zoning.
is anybody doing it, has it worked anywhere else?
Attorney Hearn?
That I'm-
Put you on the spot?
There are certain cities that are known for having a lot of parks and rec, and so I can't think offhand what their, it would be more than 1.5 for a 3-bedroom though. But having said that, again, there's 2 different issues, right? The first one here is what Will's saying here is that if, the difference here is, I think, the mayor's saying, look, if you're going to spend $100,000, I don't care if it's a kitchen or whatever it is, then put it in a driveway, because right now you're legally non-conforming, yet you're spending that type of money and you don't have a driveway. That's not exclusive of the other issue which you're raising, which is,
If I have a legal driveway.
in addition, if you have
right.
bedrooms, that's not 25%, and you have a legal driveway, do you need to increase
Okay,
your...
I'm okay with the second one, and I'm okay with the first one. Both as phrased, just as you had it.
So the second one's a new one. The first one is one we
So
agreed
repeat
to
it again.
prior.
So do it again, do it one more time.
The one we've agreed to before, and that's not to put pressure on you there, Commissioner Tudor, is that forgetting bedrooms, forgetting occupancy, if you are increasing the square footage of your house 25% or more, and you don't have a driveway, an off-street driveway, you must put in an off-street driveway.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Majority, I think, does.
Yes.
The second issue is if you are going from a 3 to a 4-bedroom, just an example, but it's under 25%, but you're adding a bedroom, and you don't have an off-street driveway, 'cause that's really what we're talking about. Or actually, what you're actually saying is different, I'm sorry. And that whether or not you have an off-street driveway, if you cannot...
Insufficient spaces. This is a
If you
space
cannot
issue.
meet your parking,
Requirement.
Then
Like,
you cannot
let's
have
say
that
one car per
bedroom.
bedroom. If we did one car per bedroom, for sake of argument.
okay, now, then the question is with or without an exception. What happens there is you do get into a little bit of arguably property rights and issues,
Okay.
because I can say, well, I might be increasing my bedrooms, but we actually love Uber and we don't even own a car.
I like the idea that if you own the cars, okay, well, this
Now
is...
you're really getting in the weeds. I mean, that's,
Well, here's the problem, and this is the reality of the problem. And it happens, I saw it all over Boca. They all have garages, and I'm using this as an example. They all have garages, enough two-car garages. And then sure enough, their garage turns into something other than a garage. And then they have trouble finding parking because the two little spaces they had for visitors out front is what they're now using for parking. And if they have three and a kid grows up in the house, they now have to find a place to park that car and to park it on the street, and it's becoming a big issue. So,
Since we have no on-street parking anyway.
the same issue, they don't have street parking either. So
Right.
they're still parking in the street illegally, is what I'm saying, because they have no place
So
for the
that
cars.
means we
you
just,
see, right,
Okay,
you
so
see,
So-
I don't see how the situation is any different than where we're saying that you have to have your car parked on an approved parking space. An approved parking space can only take up a certain percentage of your front yard.
Okay.
That will never change. So now if you have a front yard that happens to not, it's big enough for right now, for the size of your house right now. Let's say it's 2 parking spaces for the size of your house, and there's enough for that. If you then increase your house to a 4-bedroom, and the size of your front yard can't accommodate
Then you
2
can't
more
develop. Right.
spaces, then, like we said before, either you have to, if you want not to get in property rights issues or anything, we're not telling you you can't have a car or anything, but you're gonna either have to store it,
That's fine.
put it somewhere else.
That's a big
Or you have
difference.
to take Uber.
that's a big difference. I agree. So what we're saying here is you
Okay,
can.
great.
So
We'll- we'll-
that aligns with the other example. You can build your house as large as you want, but if it goes over 25% and you don't meet our code, you got to meet our code.
Right.
Same way here. You can have 4 or 5 bedrooms, but if you're parking on the grass and the grass is dying, we're going to cite you with code enforcement until you store your car. But to say that you cannot increase your home does get into a property
that
rights
makes
issue.
sense. Right.
Okay, then let me go back to, because we scratch Mac's car. Can we have a minimum? Because what I see happening is flippers are coming in, they're increasing the square footage of the bedrooms, and then they're walking away with the parking. And the person left holding the bag is a code enforcement officer, has to waste their time every single day going out to property, which isn't going to happen. Okay, so I would still like to see regulations that basically prevents that situation from occurring in the first place. Having said that, if we have a minimum number of spaces for bedrooms, for example, a 1 and 2 bedroom has to have, 2 spaces,
We have that.
right? A 3 and 4 bedroom has to have 4 spaces. Change it around a little,
Or 4-bedroom does anyway.
okay? But the 3 does not.
And we have nothing over 4.
And that's a problem, because we have some 6 bedrooms now in the village. And I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people developing properties that are making it much larger. There's one on 119th Street, there's one on 116th Street, there's another one on, I think it's 112.
And that's fine, but it's still contained by the code officer. I mean, if they're not parking their cars on approved surfaces, then they're given violations,
There's
and
codes in place
that's
and still
resolved.
going to violate them. We're not going to make enough codes to catch people from not doing it. They're going to violate. So we have to make the codes just strong enough that our code officers, police, whoever it is, has the ammunition to cite the person, but we're not going to be able to legislate
So,
a strict prevention.
so, I'm not in agreement in this, just saying. I think if you're going to be able to take a house that's a 1-story house, turn it into a 2-story house, put another 2 bedrooms in, so you're now a 4-2,
Yeah.
okay, and you have enough spaces for 2 in the front, you're okay with that?
If you have enough spaces for 2, you can't park the 3rd and the 4th car. You're going to get cited every day.
Right, but now we've created a situation in which our code officer is not, we don't have the resources to do this and spend their life doing that. I just don't agree with that. I think the way the language is written, that there should be, and tell me if there's a legal problem with this, because if there's a legal problem, then speak now. Is there a problem legally to say that, and it's any developer does this, they know the size of the land, they know how much stuff they can put on it, we have setbacks, we have other things, we're going to allow a second story. We allow a second story. So if you have a 2-1 and you increase it to a 4-2, then you need 4 parking spaces, at least 2 tandem. I don't think that's
If somebody has a
unreasonable.
4-1 and it's a couple and they have 2 cars, they have adequate parking. I got no problem with them having a 4-bedroom as long as they're car. Now, if they have a 3rd car and they start parking on the grass, they're going to get I mean, the driveway
Okay.
ordinance should be, but the driveway ordinance should be a very, it's, I think where it gets confusing, we're trying to legislate every little possible, well, this or that or this. It should be, you must park on an improved surface. Improved surface can be no more than 40% of your front yard. The materials that the driveway can be are X, Y, and Z. You know, and then we can tackle, if we're going to allow you to develop, you can develop swell parking, 40%, one space, whatever it's going to be. It should be very straightforward, and then allow for those who are going to violate the ordinance, then we'll have the mechanism in place to go and cite them, and then we can do, I mean, we already have, I mean, that's all we can really do. We can sit here and try to pick out every little, well, what if this happens, or what if that? You can do that to the point where the regulation gets so burdensome and so confusing to residents that it's no longer a good piece of legislation. So I think, I mean, we have to rely on the fact that, you know, I don't care if you have a 6-bedroom house and you only have space for 2 or 3 cars. If you only have 2 or 3 cars and you made the stuff to park and it's no more than 40% of the front yard, and if it's got to be a little bit more than 40%,
We have a lot of it,
you
okay.
can apply for a variance. I mean, we have all these things in place, but we're trying to do too much on this one ordinance, and that's why it's taken us so long to get to this point. And I think we have
I'm
to
just going to
stop.
make, I'm just going to make one other comment. We have a lot of investors coming in and doing this kind of thing. And I think if we don't have something in place to deal with this, we're going to have issues. And I can tell you the people who end up dealing with the issues are the neighbors that have to deal with it, because that's where they end up parking.
But you're focusing on investors that are coming into the park, and then in that whole thing, you're sweeping up residents into that as well. I mean, this will handle investors as, you know, as well. I just think it's just getting a little bit, it's just a little bit too much micromanaging on this legislation. I think we need to have it so people know you can't park on an unimproved surface. This is what you can park on. This is what your driveway design standards are. And if you're going to violate that, then we'll go ahead and cite you. And if you do it every day, we'll cite you every day. And we'll do it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And I have no problem with that. I mean, I don't know, maybe from a village manager standpoint.
No, I mean, all I want is something enforceable, from my perspective. I mean, I understand what the mayor's trying to do. She's trying to give us specifics with teeth, and I get that, and I appreciate that. In this particular instance, I think we've got a little too many teeth. We've got a whole mouthful of teeth. And,
Okay? No, I'm obviously
so-
not, so this is so that's not an agreement. So the 25%
Stays.
stays, the issue, we all agree that the 25% stays?
Yes. Commissioner Tudor.
Let me see we've been
That was
talking
the
about-
25%, so you don't have a driveway, you've increased your square footage 25% no matter what it is, then you
You
would
put in a
have to.
driveway.
And let's say you have an existing non-conforming parking surface, a swell area that meets your parking needs.
Right, as proffered, you still need to have an off-street driveway.
Correct.
Yeah, I see, I just, you know, I just think we need to get away from the 25% and we need to focus on there having to be adequate parking, make sure there's adequate parking if you increase the occupancy. So if you have a
You
two-car
can't do
driveway-
occupancy, so you can only do bedrooms.
any type of new construction or any type of renovation that would increase, I mean, that's how, I mean, we could always look at, there's plenty of other cities that have these driveway ordinances on their books that I don't believe they're having this type of difficulty with. So I know some of those that I've looked at, they've talked about the increase in occupancy as being one of the triggers for the driveway.
How do you deal with occupancy?
Make sure they meet the design standards.
I haven't seen it when they say occupancy, it's usually the bedrooms, because occupancy, like you
Legal
said,
bedrooms.
you could have 6 bedrooms and 2 people.
Yeah.
This is a huge issue, as far as, and it is a little bit more based on the rentals and the property rights of people able to rent, and you got to be very careful about regulating that. You got to be very careful about diminishing people's property values to regulations.
Agreed.
So, I mean, as we've kept it, we didn't get involved in the occupancy other than what we've already done. If you want to increase it for a 5 or 6 bedroom, I would suggest that we don't do it here. We would actually get someone in the land development business to tell us what that standard is, as opposed to making that on the dais.
Okay,
Or we just don't address it right now.
okay. I have no problem with that.
'Cause
So
we have
are-
to
Yeah, I
defend
can't
that.
imagine somebody, a husband and wife, saying, oh, great, I've got a 2-bedroom house, I want to increase it to 6 bedrooms, because I want more bedrooms. For no particular reason, nobody's going to stay there, nobody's going to drive in. I like the idea. The only bad thing about using code enforcement as a citation is, as Skip had told us, they don't want to pay it, they don't have to pay it. They wait for 20 years till they sell the house. And we put liens on the house, and it's everywhere. But yeah, that's what I'm
And that
saying,
is a
but it's everywhere,
possibility,
it's,
but, I mean, the reality is, most of our homes, you know, even with that ability on the behalf of the village, most of our homes do not have liens on them.
Yeah.
So I think most people are going to be compliant ultimately once it's brought to their attention, so.
Okay. Well, I think we've made quite a bit of progress, despite the fact the last piece was probably the most challenging.
And something I think will be a very quick answer, I just want to make sure, because we haven't, you brought up the term, but we haven't talked about it directly. Ribbon driveways, still allowed? I believe
Yes.
they are, I don't think you've changed it, but I just
No.
want to make sure.
Yeah, driveways, the reason ribbon driveways was pointed out originally, most ribbon driveways only went as far as the property line.
Right.
They did, if a ribbon driveway went to the road, hey, it's a driveway, it doesn't make any difference.
But now that approach to the ribbon driveway would need to be a ribbon driveway.
Absolutely.
Okay. Based on what we discussed just a few
Well,
minutes.
no, you can have an approach that's kind of a funnel that goes up to a ribbon drive. I don't know if it has to
Same
be.
material.
Same material,
Yeah,
same
same
material.
Yeah,
Same material. That's what I meant. Okay, sorry, yeah, all right, we're good.
So are we going to have the ribbon driveways have to now put in approaches if they don't have one?
Yes.
It says, you said same material, that would be the
The
effect.
same material.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anybody whose driveway has been put in during this process, and they put gravel in, I guess that has to stay, because we told everybody, whatever improvements you made would be accepted.
I'm thinking.
Now, what we could do is, any gravel approaches that were put in can be maintained until the property is sold. But I don't know, that's.
I'd rather just make that a non-conforming
Just
and,
make it
Yeah,
not-
make it
okay,
non-conforming.
that's great.
Yeah.
I'd rather mind conforming and not make
Yeah.
these people jump through more hoops, because let's face it, if you got a ribbon driveway at some point and somebody else buys the house, they're going to eventually
and truth be told, when
Probably.
people buy something, if they find it's non-conforming, they often want it to be fixed.
fixed
They don't-
anyway.
yeah.
So I'd rather not make these people jump through hoops for the little approach, personally. I think that's
Okay.
silly.
One thing I would like to also have included in this somewhere, and we're talking about parking on medians, just an allowance for median parking for city-sponsored events. It's like, tonight, we're having a commission meeting, if we need to park on the median, and just so that people aren't saying, you did it, why can't I? And it's
Absolutely,
not
because they've
illegal
said
to
that.
you.
They've said
So-
exactly that. Yep.
Yeah. I think I've
Excellent.
said that.
Okay, so I
The
think,
landscaping objects
What?
in your swale, the markers and whatever,
we didn't bring that up tonight. You want to bring
that's,
that up tonight?
we're not addressing that now.
No.
I mean,
No.
yeah, I
No.
think you're good at that.
What time is it? Is it midnight yet?
Yeah, I don't know
This
if
meeting
mentally I
goes, yeah,
can take
it's
a landscape.
9:34, so we're actually, not too bad. Well, not really, but, the marker issue is an issue. We can bring it up next time and look at that. I do think there's been a lot of discussion about, and I can take a look at my particular mud pit this week. Taking that corner is really a problem for many folks, and that's an issue of, we need to look at a way to help homeowners with that.
And what is the direction now? To bring this back as an
Bring it back.
ordinance?
To
Or
bring
just
it
to bring
back.
it back?
To bring it back, I think, do you want to finalize it as an ordinance?
Bring back as much as we've gotten done as an ordinance. Is that okay?
Yeah, not as a first
And if there's
reading.
anything else in there that you think fits.
Yeah,
normal,
we may
just
find
be
something,
on.
okay.
And then after, we'll finalize it next meeting, hopefully, and then put it as an ordinance. So we'll do it as a draft ordinance? Is it?
Yeah,
All drafts.
I'd like to have an ordinance when it's ordinance time. I would hate to have to frock everything. It's literally pages of frocking.
Okay.
I'd rather do that when we're really
All right.
advertising.
Okay.
Red line. Yeah.
Red line.
Can you redline that for me?
Okay, so, we got past driveway. Village clerk, do you mind, a bit of the water, is that possible? Thank you so much. Okay, so, now we're going to move on to new business. That's my section, which is methods of improving communication and transparency with residents. Thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and, let me just pull that up for a minute.
What is that?
That is number
13A.
13A. Okay. This was brought up back in June, okay? Sorry, my little Kleenex here, forgive me, guys. The mayor's got a cold. Okay. I brought this back up in June, and the purpose of this discussion item was to have the commission work in collaboration with the village administration to expand the scope, quantity, and accuracy of information provided to our residents in order to improve the village overall level of communications. One of the things that a lot of residents have talked about prior to the hurricane was a need to improve communication, and after the hurricane, that became a very, very big topic. Since the village cannot afford a designated communication department, the commission and village administration need to explore efficient and cost-effective methods to improve communication and transparency through timely dissemination of items relevant to our residents. And this included things like website improvements, use of notification tools, whether that be text messages or other types of things, notifications, active campaigns to increase residents' website subscription, and if we end up going with texting, that may be another option. Reinstating a quarterly or semi-annual newsletter and direct correspondence when appropriate or needed. We have 3,000 residents, and only 10% of them are now currently subscribing to our village website. Is that accurate, approximately?
Approximately.
Okay. Maybe a little more or a little less, depending. Our template is very constrained. I don't think I need to beat this one because we actually put $7,000 in our new budget.
Right.
Now, when I wrote this was June. So a lot of things have changed since June and now. So I want to compliment the village manager on several of those improvements already. He's already made major improvements to the website as it currently exists in the structure it's in. I know the intention is to make a whole newly designed website that's more functional. The other thing is it does not allow easy communication by the elected officials. So what we've done that now, and give a compliment out, shout out to the clerk here, is when I was writing letters and things, I found that every time I would send out an email, it would just bounce back 90 or 100 of them, and it would take me hours to do all this. So now what I've done is I send my correspondence in a PDF, send it to the village clerk, and she shoots it out for me for an e-blast. That's, I have found, the most efficient way to communicate without it being very timely. But in order to do that, really, if only 300 residents or 400 residents are getting it, that's really still not addressing that. So I think one of the things we really need to do is find a way to get more people registered in one format or another. So we'll have to look at methodologies to do that. The other issue was the type of reporting that was done. The big issue that I ran on was transparency on everything. And if we had the good, the bad, and the ugly, everybody had to be able to see it. So I looked at different types of things that we could do, and lo and behold, the village manager already done many of them. So we'll talk about that. He has a weekly manager's report. That's one of the things that I was suggesting. You've already done that. You also include all the police stats on that, and you also have on the webpage police stats for everybody to get. So everybody gets the same information, equal access. And you've already done that. So thank you. I will take that off this list. The issue for public safety, we now have hopefully we'll have a public safety board which will help communicate out to the public crime prevention, traffic enforcement, and reporting hazards. Just the other day I went through North Miami and smacked the top of my car with a branch that came off. One of the things that would be nice to be able to do is shoot out stuff if we have a problem. So whether it's a water main break, a tree limb that's down, something so we have a way to communicate those issues in a timely manner to folks. I think that was one of the issues with the hurricane is boil water orders, and trying to get that communication out was tough. The other thing that some of the residents were talking about were positive things, like if I'm a new homeowner, can I get a pamphlet or a booklet? I know we have something online that we have, but making sure that new homeowners know what's when and what's where so they just don't guess. I found that I had several new homeowners and they're putting out the trash on the wrong day and they just don't know, and then you go over and tell them and they say thank you, they didn't know. It'd be nice to have kind of a new resident packet. I think we used to do that.
We have that. We have that.
You have it online now or hand one?
I believe it's online and a.
And you have it handing out now?
Yeah.
Okay, we didn't, when I did this before, there was nothing.
Surprise.
Once again, he's already taken care of it. Okay.
Good job.
They get it? Okay.
The rec board did?
Thank you.
Can we, suggestion, as long as we're talking about that,
Yeah.
is when people come in, do people actually come in themselves and ask for a title search, or is it a title search company, or?
It can be
Varies.
either. It can,
varies.
sometimes it's the realtor, sometimes it's the title search company, sometimes it's a prospective buyer or the current owner.
And to clarify, it's a lien search, we're not doing a title
Okay,
search.
it's a legal search.
Yeah, lien search.
Lien search. My
But-
thought is, so if a homeowner comes in,
Mhm.
or a real estate agent comes in, give them that packet, let them know what they can expect before they even purchase.
Absolutely.
Okay. The other thing was maintaining clean, safe, and beautiful properties. The 10 most common code violations, upcoming target enforcement areas. So let's say we decide to focus on an area, and a link to our code and ordinances so they can read it, so if they want to know. One of the things we used to have, Miami Shore still has it. It was pulled out when we got the new building, but I liked it. When I came into the village hall and I wanted to know what a fence was allowed, I would go pick a thing that said fence, and it was a little turntable that had all the papers and flyer, and I know it's old school, and maybe it can be on the website too, but I like the idea if I want to walk into my village hall and say, I'm considering putting in a new driveway, what would that look like? And there's a visual picture with a drawing on it, and it makes it easy, and I think you already know this because I picked up every flyer that Miami Shores had and handed it to you.
We both did, yes.
So, I'd like to see something that reinstated, because it's very friendly, it's very user easy, and those folks who don't have, computers, and then it can also be put on the website for people who do. I'm just going over these real quick, and then we can talk about them. Rules for garbage, trash, and recycle and citations. I know we have it on the website now. We didn't back then. Home improvements that require permits, online permit applications and fees, and processes to start closing, including board reviews and inspection processes. This one was kind of, this one I think is probably open for discussion, but I like the idea of online permits, but when I talked about it with the building clerk, she did not, because she wanted to have a face-to-face conversation. She felt that became a more useful tool. So I'll withdraw the online application unless we do simple things that don't require a lot, that aren't, maybe do the simpler things on that.
But they can download the form online.
But they can download the form online.
Right.
Okay, which they can do now.
Yeah, some places I've seen, what they'll do is the form that you use for applying for a permit actually becomes the permit.
Well, and there's also.
Or at least the front page, the first page of it does become the permit.
I mean, I know you're going to go do a whole building official, we're going to put out an RFP and all that, so
Right.
when that comes in, I'm sure these things can be looked at in greater detail.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we want to start doing with particularly large renovations is collecting digital files of the house plans, that sort of thing. And from that perspective, being able to apply online, upload digitally the files, all of that could be something we want to look at, so.
Yeah, and I think also, we talked about, which will come up in our next, hopefully, meeting in the construction ordinance, is dealing with how to deal with very large renovations in a more orderly fashion in terms of permitting. The master permit piece. Okay. But that's next time, not this time. And the other one is rental properties, permit fees and inspections, as well as the tenant, making sure the tenant knows what's happening. Because it's one thing if you're a homeowner, you tend to go find out. If you're a tenant, maybe yes, maybe no, you may not ask. And getting that to the landlord during their inspections to ask them to please pass it on to their tenants. And once you're doing selling properties, I think you already have this covered, so I'm going to skip that one. We already did the medians, it's kind of covered. Everything that's going on at the Ed Burke Rec Center. I know we have a Facebook page.
We do.
I'd kind of like to see everything be centered more so that people know where to go, even if it links to it, so that it goes through our website. I don't know if it already does.
Our Facebook page links to our website? Is that
In
what
other
you're-
words, if you have it by department of what's going on, and somebody wants to click on that department, not just a calendar, but you had everything in that department, so they'd know. Like, if I'm a mother and I have 2 kids, and I want to know what's going on at the rec center, I have a way to actually quickly go do that.
Do you know, I'll ask the clerk, do you know, is there a link to the Facebook page for the rec center on our website currently? No? Okay.
Okay.
Good.
I didn't even know we had a Facebook page till the other day, I was told. I learned something new. And finally, home business registrations and facility rentals. These are kind of user-friendly things that I think we need to have a user-friendly way to get that information across. And the last thing I'll talk about that you've already done is the reports, which is the weekly manager's report on village operations. You've done that. Monthly and annual police reports, done that. Quarterly finance department reports, working on that. And monthly code department priorities, progress, and stats. I'd like to see that as we're moving forward to have more information on that as well. And that's it. So, open for discussion.
I know one of the issues that kind of came up as a result of the hurricane, and everybody's talked about communication, is that once the technology goes down, it does go back to old school, boots on the ground type thing. The difficulty is, even though we're a small municipality, it's still too large for individual commissioners to get out there to everybody to update them on the boil water and such. So one thing I had talked about way back when I was campaigning, it seems like that was forever ago, and I talked to the village manager about, is just a very rough concept of zoning out the village into 5 zones, and a commissioner would rotate amongst the 5 zones. So the next time we have an issue like Hurricane Irma, when the manager comes and says, I need to get this morning update out or this afternoon update out, hey, Commissioner Tudor, hey, Will, I know you got zone 3. I need you to take these and hit the street and get the information out to residents, and I can go and do that. And I think, because what I saw talking to Christian during the aftermath after Irma was that, he has limited resources. And, and I told him on more than one occasion, and he took me up on it on more than one occasion, that in this situation, I work for you. And whatever you need, I'll do. Delivering water, wellness checks, whatever you need, I'll do it. So I think something like this may actually help to kind of coordinate that effort, so next time we're not kind of in the dark and commissioners may be going to the same area and talk to the same people, that this is just a little bit more of a my mind's not even working.
It's another
More
form of
formalized
outreach.
process.
Absolutely.
And I would say that was the one thing during the storm that all of us, I'll speak for myself, but I know that I said the same thing to you, whatever you need. And I think almost every commissioner I know, as well as almost any resident I know, it was, what can we do to help? I know, but it was really challenging on the wellness checks. Because even though I had a list of people to go to, I would talk to one and they said, yeah, but did you go over here or go over here? So by the time I got finished, what I thought was going to be a one check for all these people ended up being I got halfway done. So this is great. I think the other thing we may want to look at is trying to come up with, and I think you were looking into a way to do texting. And I think that may be another thing where people may not be so unwilling to get, especially the younger folks and even some of us older folks here. I know that if I had a text link to an e-blast where I then clicked on it, went on the website, and it was there, I might be willing to do that, and I don't know how that would work with public records.
It would involve giving your cell phone number, I assume. So it would be a public record.
It would still, your cell phone would be a public record.
I'm actually talking to, there's a company that I've been having discussions with, and they're actually going to provide me a demo 1st of November, a company called Everbridge.
I've heard of them.
They have this system. The one that would be best suited for us is for smaller organizations and municipalities, called Nixle. And what it does, it covers, when a situation arises, they do push notifications, text messages.
Schools do
They
this
may
all the
even
time,
do
right,
the
right.
landline. So like even during the storm, when I wasn't getting great cell service, all of a sudden I get a boonk, and there was a tornado warning. I'm glad I got that. But, something like that, once I talk to them, they're going to kind of give me a little access to it and run me through scenarios of how the system works. And
Can
so
we do that through somebody else and then it's not a public record?
No.
No,
you
I didn't think
can't,
so. That's an
You
end
can't
around.
put it in a private entity
Right.
to avoid
Yeah.
the public records law, yeah.
That's
But
what I-
it's funny, because the more people that do it, the less the issue is of who you are, because it's so many people. Yeah.
Right.
I started to have this conversation with our manager as well, and he brought up the public records. I opted in to get the notifications from Miami Shores, and they're helpful. Sometimes there's police stops, there's a crime that just happened, and you're getting the notification that, okay, don't go in that area. And, you know, I said to Christian, I'm like, that seems like something that would be useful
Yeah.
to us, but, you know, I hear the public records issue, but again, what Attorney Hearn just said, you know, the more people that get involved, maybe it becomes less problematic, but I think it is really, we walk around with our smartphones and everything, and we're busy, and I think getting text messages of important notices.
But there's a technology piece that you can use, because I know it's out there for the schools as well, where you push to that phone number, but that phone number is not really their phone number. So they can give you a mock phone number, which is a public record, and it still blocks their ability to have their real phone number. So they can actually, there's software, there's apps already out there, so that our public record is met, and they're given the number that they gave us, because that's where we pushed it to, but it's not their real number. So I'm just saying that there's ways so that people who are very private can still maintain that privacy to some level.
Well, that's-
However, there's another side to that was, how private do you want to be when you're in need? I don't care who has my cell phone number, my whatever. When you're in the middle of trying to find stuff, you don't care. And I think part of the challenge here, if there's a public safety issue, if there's information that you need in a disaster situation, or for that matter, just want to know what's going on with the village, I see most people aren't doing it because they just don't know. They don't. They say, oh, I got an e-blast, and then somebody gives it to them. I think we have to do it twofold. I think we have to do, you know, this is our new webpage, everybody come do that. I think we have to find every venue we can to really push subscription.
I agree. The one thing that I want to really stress, though, for all residents is in an emergency like with Irma, when electricity's gone, cell towers are down, really our forms of communication are very limited. Please always come to a public building, either Village Hall,
Absolutely.
the rec center, somewhere like that, because that's where staff are going to be. We will have updates for you. You may have to leave home and reach out to us, because we just don't have the staff to go door to door. Commissioner Tudor's idea would help as well. But the first stop for residents, please go to a public building, and we'll have information there for you.
Right, because I think
And
one of
so-
the misconceptions was we're so small that we can do X, Y, Z.
Right.
It's not, I mean, I've walked the whole streets when I was campaigning. I know how long this takes. There's no way in emergency we're going to be able to get this to you in a timely way. You're absolutely correct and well said that every single public building here, just so you know, was every single public building, he put notices on, the updates were on, every single public building had paper. And then on top of that, many volunteers. I think Mr. Ross went out.
Chuck Ross did,
Right,
yeah.
Mr. Raymond went out. A lot of residents went out and put up signs to help out. So I absolutely applaud you for the effort that was made to make sure information got out. But once again, you're correct. They have to come to the public building.
But that was an afterthought.
Yeah.
They didn't know they had to come to a public building.
We
I
didn't tell
figured-
them because we didn't think about it,
Well,
right?
it was just one of those things that, yeah, it was not on our radar at that point. Now we do, we have time before the next hurricane, God willing. And so, I mean, now we can start getting word out to people about that. Because that's, whenever all of the other forms of communication fail, my pen and paper will still work. So,
I like the
As long
idea
as you come to the mayor's house who had internet, that's when it
about a
works.
separately hosted phone system, because this way, people can always, no matter where, no matter how bad it was in the village, depending where you walked, you got cell service. No idea why, and it may not have been permanent, but you got cell service somewhere. And if you knew there was a number you could call into to find out what was going on, that would be a great thing.
that would be, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I know we were talking about every possible avenue of getting information out to residents. I know there was one that I don't know is a possibility. I'm kind of looking at the village clerk to see if she may have any information. Now
Oh,
is
she does.
Well, actually, the meeting that actually our village manager and myself attended with Brian Andrews, he was talking about, we have a radio station. North Miami Beach has a radio station, and they even mentioned that there were other cities as well that have a radio station, like Aventura and Sunny Isles Beach. So they are out there, but that would be a tool that we could tap into and possibly work with them so that then the residents here will also get information about what's happening right here. So, again, this is something that we can look at. We are waiting for everything to line up so that I can provide you guys with the information.
And just to make it clear, one of the challenges with that be, or one of the things we should need to look at is satellite phones, so you can get that information from here to there, because other than your feet or trying to drive over there, you wouldn't have been able to get it there. So we do need to have communication to whatever sections we're doing, and I think that's one of the things. I had story after story where these people had no lights, no power, no internet, no phone, no nothing. And I said, well, they were afraid because they saw somebody coming on the property. They said, we couldn't dial 911. And you don't think about these things until it happens. So I do think that, I think having our police and having our manager, critical people involved should have methods of communication with staff, and I think we could look into that expense-wise. And I don't know how other big cities do it, but we might want to look into that. And that's really all I have. Since you're doing most of this, this is almost a wasted item, but since we brought it, and then the communication of the hurricane, maybe there's a lot of lessons we learned from that we can now incorporate moving forward. So this was really just a discussion piece. It's pretty outdated since you've come so far. You may have only been here 6 months, but it seems a whole lot longer for you since you work here 24/7.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Are you guys going to address 13C?
Yep.
Oh,
Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to have to table something because
13B.
one of them left, so. 13B, I think we're going to have to table that since commission.
John, on committees like code enforcement and things like that, a member cannot not vote.
Unless there's a legal conflict or a appearance of conflict under 286 Florida statutes.
What about a commissioner?
Same with the commissioner.
So
If
he
you're
can-
present,
But you can just leave.
you can, right, it's only, the rule is if you're present, you must
Okay.
vote.
You're planning for next?
So, please advise on 13B, since that was Commissioner Ross' item, do we just table that to the next meeting?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll table that. Then, Village Manager, you want to discuss Dave Caserta's contract?
I didn't, just,
There he is giving out water again.
I didn't participate in this, it came kind of quick, but I do notice that it's Mayor Coviello, but we'll make sure you sign it.
Oh. Okay. Go call Dave. Thank you, I'm good.
that's not the new contract. That's the old
That's
one.
the old contract, that's not.
Oh, because it's blank.
Yeah, because it was the old contract that I just gave it so that you guys could have a discussion on what was already approved.
Oh, I got you, okay.
That's
I
not-
wasn't part of the discussion, so I don't know what they were, yeah.
We'll leave it to the Village Manager.
We'll collect, don't worry.
You guys deserve more than water for sitting here all this time. Thank you. Okay, believe it or not, you're on.
Okay.
You can have a sip of water. We don't hold you to that.
No, I'll do it dry. It's good.
Okay.
So I was speaking with Dave Caserta. His contract expires October 31st, I believe. Dave is our lobbyist in Tallahassee. He's done a phenomenal job through the years. He's been with us for a while now. We pay him $20,000 a year. He wasn't really asking for a raise in price. He did ask that among all of his clients, they usually split the amount of his expenses. And he says usually it runs about $3,000 a year. I said, well, that's just far too much. We can't afford that. And so he said, well, could you do $2,500? And I said, I'll mention that to the commissioners. And so he has asked for that in his contract. That's something that we haven't budgeted for specifically. We do have the money for that. I can move that from another line item in administration relatively easily. And so I would ask that you guys consider that.
I spent a lot of time out with Dave, and he does a lot more than what's in Tallahassee. He does a lot of help with our legislators. When we needed FPL power, Dave was one of the people I called, in addition to everybody else under the sun. Dave helped with our state senators and representatives to try and get some support for us and call in. I will tell you, between his work and our work. I think that's one of the reasons why FPL came here with so many trucks so quickly, and also with the federal level of help that we had. But I will speak for Dave Caserta. He has done a phenomenal job in having worked with him. I have no problem with that. I think that's a minimal amount of money. And we did decrease his salary from previous years. It went down quite a bit, and now this would be still not more.
Did you say they went, his salary?
We
back in the
actually,
day?
it was, in the previous commission, they actually pulled it back down.
Yeah. Dave's been here a long time, and there were years when, during the recession, where he actually
Right.
worked for $1. So just,
Yeah, he does that. And oftentimes, with this last time, it pretty much paid his salary, because he got us a $20,000 grant for cameras. So it actually covered his salary, so if you want to look at it that way. So I do support it. We want to wait for Harvey?
is that to author, I know you haven't voted yet, but is that to authorize entering into a contract? Then I'll
To authorize him to enter into contract with that increase, and that he would use the money from his other line items within that
Right.
category to pay
We have
for it.
one for background checks and so forth that has a few $1,000s in it. I don't think we'll need that
Okay.
this year by any means.
Okay.
We seem to have a pretty stable workforce right now, so.
Okay, that's a good thing.
It is.
We're waiting on you, Commissioner Bilt. That's okay. So is there consensus to go ahead and approve the draft of contract with the increase for the expenditures used from the line item already in the budget?
Yes.
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 Yeah,
Motion?
okay.
I'm sorry. Did you say motion?
I said, was there a consensus? And there's a consensus. And now I'm asking, is there a motion?
Yeah, because this one, I don't think I need to bring back this contract if you just move to approve.
Do we would adopt and approve? How does it, because that's not the same contract. It's not,
No, but it'll be substantively the same. It's a lobbyist contract that
okay.
substantively it's very light. It always has been.
So is
if
there
you
draft,
move
is
to
there, is there a motion to draft and adopt
Motion to draft and adopt. Dave Caserta's contract,
with the amended amount?
With the amended
$2,500.
$2,500.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, request for placement on next agenda meeting. I guess we're definitely going to put the, bring back for the driveway to do a final.
Yeah.
I also would like to see the construction ordinance start to begin to look at consensus on building on the construction ordinance. And then I was going to ask the village manager, did you want to bring back the bank issue?
You have one more issue.
Actually,
Ooh, because I forgot it was there.
Yep.
So, scratch that, take two, 13D. Rewind. I did write it here, I just didn't read my own scribble.
It's okay.
Discussion regarding manager's review.
okay.
Do you want to address a little bit? I know you have an upcoming review in November.
Well, I mean, and that's up to you guys. Is it an actual review, or is it, this is sort of the end of my probationary period, so do you want to do a full review, or do you want to say, yeah, we like you, stick around, or we don't like you, get the heck out, or do you want to do a formal review? That's up to you guys on that one, so.
Can we just bring him a cake?
I'll buy the
That's all he
ingredients.
gets for being here 24/7? A cake? Really? Okay. It's kind of really what you want, I think, in some instances, and I'm going to let the attorney weigh in here, and based upon contract, is there anything contractually?
Well, I thought I brought the contract. This was a late ad, so I didn't have the contract right with me, and I don't have the contract with me.
Do you want to take a 1-minute break to find it?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for right now. You don't have your contract with you now?
No, I don't.
Like
just-
he has
you
any
just-
time to look
you
at this stuff.
You just like to add that and not have it. I like that.
Yeah,
As long as we
You don't know
position
your
all
contract
of
by
these-
memory?
Yeah.
not that far.
Thank you all for putting up with my cold.
That's some sort of-
Nice try. Did you find it?
No.
Do you know what month it was in? Month, his contract?
I do know that it's a review to determine, right, it's a review as determined by this commission, so it can be, there have been times that everyone's given a written review, which is a public record, and sat down individually with the manager. There's it can be as formal as informal, basically, as you want, and I'm just trying to pull up the contract on,
I believe if I recall the verbiage, it was based upon the commission.
oh, it is definitely.
Okay. I asked what the manager wanted because I really kind of want to know what he would prefer. And do you have a preference?
I mean,
You like informal?
yeah, we can.
One-on-one-
we can do
one-on-one and then
one-on-one
just in-
informally, that would be great.
Okay,
I think I get more valuable information that way.
okay.
So, I mean,
Just
that
to be
would,
transparent to the public, can we have some comments regarding, I'm trying not to give it away here. Can we have some public
Sorry,
comments
it's late, I'm not
regarding,
catching it.
regarding our, so that it's transparent to the public? I would like to at least have some comments. It doesn't have to be very formal, but
Oh, that's
at least
fine, yeah.
at least each of us to have a few minutes to discuss our review of you during the November meeting.
yeah,
Would
absolutely.
that be okay? And that way it's transparent to the public, and yet you'll get your grilling personally. No, I'm just kidding. Okay? Does that work?
Okay. I'm good with that, whatever you
Excuse
guys
me.
want.
Does that work?
Village Attorney, remember it became effective May 2nd?
Do I remember that?
Well, that,
Gee, you really are
I believe it was a cloudy day.
from the month of April was the process to go ahead and hire a manager. Then he was actually
Yeah, I thought we were looking at
approved
November, right?
as
Yeah.
manager on May, and it was retroactive to May 2nd, which is the day
Yes.
we had the meeting.
So that means that November would be the 6 months.
Yes.
Correct.
So,
So we're doing this today to discuss the process of how to
Right.
do that in November.
okay, yeah. And unfortunately, it's not coming.
So I think we should, I mean, I agree, keeping it informal and simple. Does everybody agree to that?
I agree.
At
Yeah.
the next commission meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll follow up with the language for you.
Okay.
It's just not coming, it's,
As long as you're comfortable, that's the most
we
important.
have some cell
Yeah,
towers
that's
now,
fine.
apparently.
Never, not Broward. Okay. On that, number 14, going forward, request for placement items on the next agenda. Obviously, the driveway ordinance. I'd like to see a discussion on the construction ordinance and starting to move that forward. I don't like to put two ordinances in one, however, I do think we need to see if we can do that.
I missed that, I'm sorry.
The construction ordinance, I have pared it down significantly. At least it felt significant to me. It went from, I think, 13 to 6 pages.
We just need one subject per ordinance, so if it's just a construction ordinance,
Yes,
yeah.
okay. And then the issue is, do you want to bring the bank on? I guess you can decide later. But
You want to what?
Bank, we
Oh,
went out to 3 banks, actually, I think 4 banks. Only 2 have been responsive. We have the FCB, which is the first bank we went to that sort of gave us everything we wanted and, some stuff we didn't know we wanted. The other one, let me see if I can find that text real quickly. Okay, it wasn't a text, it was an email. There we go. Okay, Bank United, they responded. They did not give us information on a proposed loan to replace the loan that we currently have, which is one of the real reasons we want to go to another bank to begin with. FCB did offer that. Another bank said they couldn't give us a proposal till we had the 2016 CAFR audit done.
really?
So, yes. And so, I mean, these are the things that we're encountering. And I know my recommendation would be to move forward with FCB and just get this going, because we're paying interest on this loan. We're not drawing interest on the money that we have on hand. Currently, I think there's a lot of benefits to that, so.
Did the finance, I know she's not here, but did the finance manager agree with that recommendation as well?
That was her recommendation as well.
Okay, just
yeah.
want to make sure that you're both on the same page on that. We don't have really, do you want to bring it before the commissioner, do it now? It's up to everybody. I mean, that's not on, unfortunately, I think well, let me just say
We
something.
need to bring it back.
I think we need to bring it
We
back
need to bring it
because
back.
it's not in the agenda,
Yeah.
and more people may want to know about that. I don't want to just push it through.
Okay,
Okay, so can you bring it back for the November meeting?
sure.
And then we'll formally do it then. Okay, reports, village attorney.
The manager and I actually sat down with the city manager and the city attorney of North Miami. Were very receptive to an interlocal agreement, and they just needed a couple days to review and approve it, and they would get back to us. It was about a few days before the hurricane.
Of
hit.
course.
So I think now's the appropriate time to reach back out, but I want to let you know, they were very welcoming. They brought in the public works guy. They understood the situation. They absolutely understand we need interlocal. So it's a different environment than my previous meetings.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good job.
I had one question for you, but now I don't remember what it is. I'll ask you later when I remember. Okay. Village clerk's board committee reports?
Oh, wait. Before we go any further, did we do the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
We did? I just didn't remember. Gosh.
You did before your poll.
Before we, yeah, but I thought we, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
there was a motion to do the consent. It was pulled, yes. I'm sorry.
Read out the
Yep.
announcements.
Yes, please.
On Monday, October 9th is, which is next Monday, is the village will be closed due to Columbus Day. Wednesday, October 11th will be Public Art Advisory Board at 6 p.m. Saturday, October 14th will be Food and Tunes Oktoberfest at the Recreation Center. Monday, October 16th is the Planning and Zoning Board meeting at 6:30. Thursday, October 19th is the Park and Parkways at 7 p.m. And again, Monday on November 6th is the Planning and Zoning at 6:30. I missed one. October 23rd, we will be having code compliance meeting. We had to change it because their meeting was originally scheduled for on Columbus Day. So we're changing it till October 23rd. Right now, it's tentative, though.
Halloween, we didn't discuss.
We have not discussed Halloween. It's being planned already. We have the Funhouse on October 31st, so we'll be going out full force with that. That's already in the planning.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure the public was aware of that.
We have one quick change too. With the foundation met last night regarding the Food and Tunes Oktoberfest, and they are not going to be able to produce that in 2 weeks. They're not ready to do that, so they want to cancel that.
Okay.
So.
Are there any other comments from the commissioners? Because I did accidentally jump over that. Nope. We're good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion to adjourn.
Second? All those in favor? Okay, we are adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you all for staying so long.